Um, so we talked about how they rejected Arizona's map, and then was it North Carolina and Ohio? So yeah,
Oh no, this the Supreme Court was 5-4 for Alabama's. That's right. That was the one. Sorry, I had to check my phone. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
it's
So
going to be a very
mhm.
contentious and problematic kind of fucking issue too. Um, Chief Justice John Roberts, um, he's kind of like been that big litigating case as far as the case back in 2003, something like that, which really kind of ended up gutting the Voting Rights Act. And I think you're kind of seeing him now really understanding what a overly conservative Supreme Court's going to do. So it's going to be incredibly contentious. Um, with Sorry, I'm reading the New York Times article as I talk about this. Um, yeah, it's going to be problematic, but we don't get to pretend like Democrats don't gerrymander as well. So it kind of depends on like you know how do you want to split this baby in half, pretty much.
Yeah, they do, but like I would say that it's wrong when either of them do it. My problem is the larger election um
Implications.
yeah, well, no. The larger shift in election laws, that makes it harder, honestly, for minorities to vote. I think that's the big problem, the big issue, and then one that we can't solve right now because there's too many frankly,
Hmm.
racist enabling Republicans in Congress, whether they're racist or not themselves, that they
Right.
enable that stuff
Well,
by
remember that.
blocking any voting rights legislation that could help solve the issue.
Yeah. I think kind of like the other problem becomes like Democrats need to start voting in local elections more often. Um, that kind of comes in on my part, at least.
But if it's gerrymandered, then and there's states where, um, like there's states where like the Democrats got like 52% of the vote, and then like control like 34% of
Of the senatorial seats, or
yeah of the
sometimes
well
the
no
House seats
congressional
and everything.
yeah House
Yeah,
seats yeah.
yeah. It's very problematic. We just kind of experienced that here in my state. I'm one of the few states that actually splits their electoral college votes. It's Nebraska and Maine. Um, and it seems to be, if I could pick an entire system for the whole country, I would definitely choose where electoral college votes are split. It certainly gives more representation to people as far as like a statewide representation. And their districts definitely have a tendency to feel more represented by their electors. But you've got like only a kind of few ways to do that. Um, one of which is the constitutional amendment. I believe there's like a website that they're trying to push this whole constitutional amendment as far as uh, elections ballots casted uh, by congressional district. Um, so I wish I could think of that off the top of my head, but that would be the system that I ideally would want to see. Because even if you could, and this is a very unlikely could, even if you could get rid of the electoral college system, um, I don't know if that helps with polarization as far as um, the nation, as in like the United States, goes. And I'm not even too sure if that's going to end up helping out representing minorities even better if you were to get rid of uh, the electoral college system, because then you still have the problem that elections are state ran. Um, that's what I would kind of worry about.
I mean,
And
oh, electoral college system actually does reduce the power of minority voters because minority voters are in going to be in larger, more populous states,
correct.
and yeah, and so the electoral college favors smaller rural states,
Well,
and so
not
it
necessarily just the electoral college, but you're also talking about the thing that I hear more often is the Senate. disproportionately
Well, no.
kind of.
Oh no, yeah, the
Uh,
Senate is a terrible institution, and we should reform it or straight up get rid of it, one or the other. Um,
I'm hearing about that push to get rid of the Senate more and more now. It's for better or worse.
I doubt that we'll get rid of the Senate, but like at least reforming it so there's some sort of proportional system that doesn't benefit the empty, boring fucking states, well, white filled states that help dominate this, um, dominate our politics. Yeah, so it's not a very representative body. So that would be a goal a long way, and also again getting rid of electoral college. That would also be helpful, and increasing the voting power. Well, by simply equalizing the voting power of everyone, right? If um when it comes to the presidential election, that all votes are weighted equally rather than what we have now. Um, so
Would you only want it for the presidential election, though?
that's
You'd
the
probably
electoral
want it down
college. It's the electoral
well,
college for that. Am I missing something here?
yeah, no, I was talking about whether or not how you would influence your state electors. Um,
State electors.
and yeah, state electors is in like your state representatives.
Okay.
I've only got senators here in Nebraska. So I think some other states have Congress and senators.
Yeah, I mean the others have bicameral. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
We've got a unicameral
Okay.
in Nebraska. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd want to do that as well. We just said we bought up electoral college, so yeah.
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 I'll give you
What?
I'll give you a kind of like a little olive branch that I've always like to kind of think about. Would you ever consider getting rid of a two-term president and just making it a 1 year, 8 term? Would you feel that that would kind of help out a little bit better?
A one. Sorry. Get rid of. Sorry. Could you repeat the question?
The president is only elected to one 8 year term.
1 8 year term. Um.
Correct. You can
Why?
still remove them through impeachment and everything like that.
But clearly we can't remove them from through impeachment. No, I wouldn't want that. Why would we want that? Why would
Well,
anyone want that?
you'd get a more consistent leadership
Oh, I
stance,
see.
right?
Hmm.
So it kind of helps with that issue. As far as like not being able to get them out of the Senate, that's not or get them out of the presidency, you can still impeach them. Just because you think it's impractical now doesn't make it fully impractical for the rest of forever. Um, that's kind of been my thought process on this because, for one, I don't like the idea of the presidency having the power to kind of work in office on his own election. So I would prefer just one 8 year term, kind of quash it from there. And then they also have the ability, um, they're also still removable via impeachment, 25th Amendment, kind of anything in those lines.
Hmm. Dr. K, you got a camera?
I do, but I'm chugging down a big granola bar right now, so give me
Okay,
like 5 minutes.
sure. All right. Debate board. Do you have anything to say?
Hey, Dustin, good to see you again.
Yeah, you too, man.
Well, I think complaints that the Senate is not sufficiently democratic is just a simple misunderstanding of the purpose of the Senate in the first place.
As long as you
It's
don't try and call it the cooling body of legislation, then I would agree with you.
No,
Um,
I mean I mean, any of us that spend any time studying any sort of American civics understands the nature and the organization of the U.S. Congress. So, what's odd about this complaint too is that between 2011 and 2015, for example, we weren't hearing liberals and progressives and Democrats complaining that the Senate was insufficiently democratic. Their only complaint is that it's insufficiently, capital D, democratic. That's all.
Um,
I
Um,
wouldn't
it,
hey,
say that that's
so
entirely true, especially on
as
Obama's court appointments. You saw that
I
that was
s- I
very
spent
much a huge issue for them, not just for the one Supreme Court nomination, but you specifically mentioned like 2014 through 16, right? Or 2011 through 16?
2011 through 2015, yeah.
Yeah, you saw that Obama could not get a single federal court judge pick, that Mitch McConnell withheld those. So I think there have been plenty of complaints as far as Democrats towards the Senate. And for whatever reason, better or worse, you don't see those kind of the same tactics being used by Democrats when they're outside of power. So, as frustrating as it may be, there have been complaints about the Senate, at least in my lifetime, definitely starting around the term of like Obama's presidency, maybe end of Bush's.
And people have been complaining about the Senate since we've had a nation, so I don't I don't entertain, that notion that it's
I
like,
miss something.
oh, you're just civically uneducated if you complain about the Senate, right? I spent six
No, I
years
don't think the
getting
argument I was
a.
making was not that there was any lack of civic education. I appealed to all of us having getting a civics course or
Okay,
a
well,
government
I
course or
would.
American
Here,
history
I'm gonna
course
finish my
where we
sentence, mate.
understand how Congress came to be organized,
Or
why there are
not, I
two separate
suppose.
houses of Congress, and my point about reaching back to 2011, 2015 is this is just simply partisan bitterness, complaining
It's
about the
not.
Senate not being sufficiently democratic.
No,
And
I
Dustin,
genuinely
Obama had plenty of
despise
federal
the.
judges confirmed. We can carp all
All
we
right,
want
I
about
guess I
Merrick
won't
Garland,
talk. Huh?
but during Obama's 2 terms as president, he had
Hmm.
lots and lots of federal judges confirmed all across the
Lots
all
is a
Am I
across the
very
muted?
incredibly broad and general number. I don't think that's
Is my mic
necessarily
broken? What's
your
up?
Well,
mic's fine. He
Okay.
might have you muted accidentally because I had that same thing
Hmm.
happen.
Oh well, no.
Uh,
I mean, what I remember, he nominated something like close to 400 people, and he had over 300 of them confirmed over 8 years. That's not a small number. I mean, I guess we can go compare against Republican presidents who had
well,
Democratic, Congress
no,
so
you
ho-
would
before
you
Senate
would
to do
want
it.
to go ahead.
oh, no, no, Dustin, finish your point, and then we'll go to Dr. K.
Okay, yeah.
Hmm.
No, the issue was the amount of federal judges that Mitch McConnell decided to withhold along that same term of Merrick Garland, and that's fine. I don't really care about the Merrick Garland thing as far as like I do care about it, but I ain't gonna fucking bitch about it because there's nothing you can do about it. But you can tell, and you can go ahead and look at President Trump during his one of the few things that he did accomplish during his presidency was eating federal judges. That was in on his continue to make America great again. Or you can also look at Mitch McConnell when he was running. That was something that an accomplishment that he had brought up as far as the amount of federal judges that they had seated after President Obama was out. That large chunk became vastly disproportional because they refused to see his amount of his picks for judges. That's kind of problematic. That a body of that a governmental body has that ability, and not even just both governmental bodies of the Congress, specifically the Senate. That would be a very kind of democratic problem as far as like um, small d, not large d.
Yeah. So anyway, Dr. K. Oh, yeah, you weren't gonna go.
Hmm. No, I have a. I'm simply against the Senate because it is an undemocratic body, and it serves as one of the greatest institutions for the disenfranchisement of the American people. Like it, it doesn't represent the beliefs and the wants of Americans in the modern day, frankly. And there's some senators I like. Most famously, Mr. Sanders. I have great respect for him, but the Senate as a whole is an undemocratic body. It disenfranchises larger states, and this has been a complaint since our country's been a thing with the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And there was a prominent faction that even early on was like notably urging that this kind of behavior, if sort of left to go on as it were, would lead to incredibly undemocratic governmental bodies. And the disproportionate level of representation that we have now is far greater than what was occurring, at the start of this nation, to the point where uh, California has what about 10% of the country's population, and yet because of the Senate as a system, two senators from that state mean that there's about 30 to 36 senators, giving the same amount of population an unbelievable and unequivocal edge over those people. It is undemocratic, and I want it gone. Like, I don't think that's uncontroversial. And it's not as though there's no precedent. There's plenty of unicameral systems, that exist in the world. Or if we have to have a bicameral system, you can make the other simply weighted heavily. Like, we don't have to, be married to the norms that were created hundreds of years ago. History's a thing that's alive and with us today, and if a system isn't working for us, we are allowed to change it. It's not set in stone.
I think the point here, though, is what does working actually mean? And I don't think everybody wants California dominating the rest of the U.S.
Well, it
And that's what you're
disenfranchises
appealing
Texas
to.
and Florida too, if you're conservative minded. Like,
No, there's no, I, this is what I, what is your, what do you mean by this premise that it disenfranchises people?
that
What do you
that
I
actually
would
mean by
I would
that?
use
two to
disadvantage.
36.
I would think you. I think the choice that you'd want to use is um, disadvantage, not necessarily disenfranchise.
Way,
Yeah,
the same
sure.
amount of population should not have 36 representatives versus two.
It
That's
equalizes. It doesn't disadvantage. It makes it equal, right? It actually brings equality. Conservatives tend to not be a fan of that, but yes, that's exactly what it does. When, at least, sorry, when you're dealing with the electoral college, but like reforming the Senate, right, at the very least as well.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's why we have the House of Representatives. If we're worried about proportional
the lesser,
representation based on
weaker house,
population,
might I add.
well, sure, there's 435 whatever members now, of
No,
course.
it
Why
just straight
can't
up
they
has
both
less
be
power.
representative? Yeah, why can't they both be representative? Why do you have to choose one or the other?
Well, we wouldn't have two of them. I mean, the whole
You
point
don't
Well,
have
of
to
yes,
have
this,
two
I,
of them.
I like unicameralism.
fair enough. So the whole point of the Senate was to temper the impulses of the public. I mean, that was
It
the
was not the point of the
philosophical
Senate. That is
part of it.
one
Oh, okay,
quote.
so if
That
that
was
is,
one
even
quote
if
out
that
of the
is what it's for,
Federalist
that
Papers.
is anti-democratic.
Well, but
It's
it
not
wasn't the
anti-democratic.
contra.
It
The,
is.
co- the
It's
people who are
stymieing the
sitting there are
democratic will.
elected to their positions. And it brings equality in terms of representation across the country. Again, Dr. K, I think your real
If
problem with
if
it
just
is
voting
simply
for
that the
someone,
majority
if just
doesn't
voting
win
for
because you think
someone,
the majority
if
is on
just
your
voting for
side.
someone is your metric of democracy, then you have to include China and Cuba and Russia in, your understanding of democracy as well. And I don't think you want to do that, do you? That is not something that would be ideologically consistent for
That
you.
makes zero sense in application to what we're talking about here by noting, right, that the Senate is filled with people who are elected to their positions means we have a manifestation of democracy in action that brings equal representation
It
across the
does
states.
not, though.
And you know what? I don't
Why
think we
does why
want
does
simple
one
majorities
body of
simply
population
ruling
have
us.
36 representatives and the same amount of people have only two? That is not democratic. That is that is innately favoring one party over the other,
It doesn't favor one
and
party over
it
the other.
disproportionately raises their voices, does it not?
Well, I don't think you get debate. I don't think you necessarily get to ignore that problem of favoring a party one over the over as far as functionality versus the plan.
Yeah, the whole point of the Senate, the reason you verbalized yourself that you like it is that it does create that tempering, that favoring of one party over the other, and
Not
temper
favoring
the
one
view
party over the other. I don't know what
of the
this
public,
party is
as
that
it
you're
were.
appealing to.
No, but you said you're
The
fine with
popular
disadvantaging
democratic will.
California though, right? You're like,
No, I
well,
And
didn't say anything
Texas.
about disadvantaging California.
you
I'm
said that
suggesting
that California would be dominating the would dominate otherwise. So like you like this system because it keeps that from happening.
I mean, if it has
it
10% of the
tempers us
people, it
being.
should have 10% of the say, should it not?
That's why we have a House of Representatives.
But that's but it doesn't have but that means it doesn't have
Yeah,
10%
the
of the
weaker
say.
house that can be overridden by the Senate and regularly, democratically, proportioned or not proportioned, but democratically proposed legislation that was created in the House will be killed in the Senate. It's pretty common, actually. So, like, I push back on this at all as this claim that, like, okay, well, that means the problem's solved and dealt with. No, no democratic inequality here because you have the House of Representatives. But if the two houses both exist and one can beat the legislation of the other, well, then no, that's not democratic.
Well, I guess
Especially
it's not
because,
democratic.
again, may I remind you, the Senate is the upper house. It is the house with greater power.
So I guess from extending your logic then, because the president can veto legislation passed by both houses of Congress, that necessarily means that Congress is not democratic at all.
Why would you even bother to go this route? I don't think anybody
Dr. K
here is
just appealed to one house being
correct,
able
but
to thwart the
right,
other house,
right,
right?
but
I
Okay.
mean, yeah,
we're
bro, I
all
don't
well,
like the presidential system either. So,
but we're
what do you
all
want
well
from me
aware
there?
of how the three branches of government is supposed to work. I don't feel like that you would want to necessarily now go to rehashing that. Your issue or the
I'm not
contention is
rehashing anything, Dustin. I'm just extending his logic to its ultimate end,
All
which
right,
is if
she.
we're going to
That's
say that
uh,
one house can frustrate the other one because it can
she.
stop
It's
legislation,
not big.
the
It's a
president
big
can
deal
do
to me.
exactly that.
Debate board. She.
No, drop it, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. My goodness, I keep forgetting. Dr. K, my apologies. I really am sorry for that.
Please drop it.
Okay.
the issue isn't with our trifecta branch of judicial, executive, and congressional. If you want to try and extend that out, I would say that it would end up being a moot point, especially because she already went and said that, I've got an issue with the presidential branches or the executive branch as well. The
Yeah, I like
problem
direct
in
democracy.
well, yeah, well, the contention has to stay in between, or at least I think the conversation has to stay in between the House and the Senate. I think you have to try and figure out how you're going to either mold these two together or how, um, maybe through the rules of the Senate and the rules of Congress that you can make it a more effective branch. This idea that one, it's even completely still fully relevant that the founding fathers wanted it to happen this way. I kind of disagree with, because it is our legislation, it is our government now. It's posterity. We are posterity. We get to shape it how it works. We don't believe that it works. The problem now becomes is that, well, we can't find a fucking middle ground as of right now in order to
And
make these changes.
mm, and to keep in mind as well, right, is we have two official, we have the Senate and we have the House of Representatives. Keep in mind too that pseudo bodies exist within our governmental systems that sort of act as sort of governmental organizations. Things like committees are not, written anywhere in
Yeah, sure.
our constitutions. Political parties are, famously the founding fathers were aggressively against such things.
They call them
Um,
factions for those of you studying history right now for college.
yeah, yeah, I'm a bit of an anti-federalist myself, but you know,
I'm
mm,
I'm pretty federalist. I would just like the fucking system to work. I don't like
no,
I'm
yeah,
very
exactly. The ultimate question is how do you get your institutions to work for your population? Because if they
yeah.
do not work for your population, then it is a system that, needs to be either fixed or removed.
I honestly think that when we talk about like committees and that kind of stuff, we are not living in the 1800s. We're talking about like a
No, we're
government
not.
that's way more complex nowadays, that has to deal with way more complex issues. So
Well,
having
Mm,
committees, having those kind of sort of things,
I'm not
having
saying
more
committees are bad.
regulations.
In fact, I
No,
like
no,
them.
but okay, cool. So we're on the same page. So
Yeah, you don't
having
need
those
to come in with
Okay.
fire and
Oh, he can
brimstone,
talk.
baby.
no,
He
no,
can
no, no,
talk.
no.
All right.
I love you, Dr. K. Don't worry. So, yeah. So having commissions is all good and that kind of stuff. When you talk about like having like two chambers or having like two like one first chamber or the House of Representatives and like the Senate, I think like it's healthy to have those things being somewhat separate of each other. So that can be like just the election date, right? So just having the fact that the election date is different from each other, so you can have like a look back to each other, but you can also have something around like the fact of that the election is somewhat different. So it can be somewhat different when it comes to having what you call district elections compared to uh, like just general elections and that kind of stuff. So it's more representative of the local population and those things. I think it's all fair and games, and I think those things can be a good counterproductive to just having like the central government saying stuff, right? Uh, how do you guys feel about that?
I mean, yeah, like generally, as a rule of thumb, the more power you dictate to your localities, generally the better things are going to be. The only major hiccups with that is obviously there are things that are only can be done efficiently at a national level or at a zoomed out level where you have a just absolutely monumental pooling of resources, right? These would be, major projects, things like national railway systems, national healthcare systems, things like that. But
Sure.
outside of things that require that level of consistency across the board, that's when you want to delegate power, generally to the smallest unit possible, and then sort of determine, from there, does it need to be brought upwards in size, upwards and upwards and upwards, right?
Yeah,
And
I
We're
like.
all in favor of
for
that,
a
Dr.
nation
K,
that has
evolving
like a
down
lot
to
of
smallest
enemies
unit.
on its borders, for instance, if you're scared of getting invaded, if things are hairy, if you've got a lot of separatist movements, things like that, that's when a more, top-down system, quote unquote, makes sense, to keep your nation coherent. But the United States does not have that problem in the slightest. And
I
so,
don't think that would be something that you would want to kind of consistently give up,
I
though.
don't
I
think
think I
I don't.
you want to shape that as a whole. You want to shape it as a holistic idea, especially
mhm.
in the way that we kind of treat South America. I think there's plenty of reason to believe that we're no longer going to have uh, a safe. Um,
No one's going to invade the U.S.
well, no
No
one's
one.
gonna. As far as like the status of the world right now, no one's gonna invade. I'm more concerned about the
Well,
broad
yes, that too.
generality of making a system that would work, regardless of how friendly your northern neighbors are, or how much
Hmm.
that would be my issue. That's not necessarily a direct attack. It's more of a general critique.
No,
But
I
debate,
completely understand, and I
yeah,
agree with that. You
yeah,
have to.
debate. Could you like,
It's generally a good idea to future proof your systems, though, and sort of
yeah,
put in redundancies. Like if you're building a bridge, you
The
put
yeah,
in, you
debate
prepare
bar.
for the worst case.
You want to say something, debate bar?
yeah. Well, I just kind of wanted to see because I'm not sure where. I know our contention is like on the Senate and the House, but I'm not sure if the contention is he's saying like the reason for the Senate is prior to these. The reason why we have the Senate and the reason why it should stay is because of how it was set up, or does he kind of think that it is functioning fine? I'm trying to gauge
Oh
or
yeah, the
figure
problem with
out
the
what.
Senate is it does put a check on democracy.
Well, I
That's the
don't.
point.
We may agree on that, but I want to make sure that I want to try and understand the question or his stance on it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dustin. No, I think, and I agree with Dr. K. As much authority we can devote
Localize. Yeah.
to the states and localities, I think the better. I think the danger areas where we have lots of folks, and we see it in Prime's chat a lot, where everything's a national issue. And the typical national priorities like national defense, for example, or national social welfare nets. Those are key priorities that we generally agree on our national things. But then we see all sorts of appeals to, in my perspective, abusing federal government power to solve issues that the federal government is neither suited to solve, possesses a competency to solve, or really
For
it's none of their
example,
business.
Would you
Think
say civil rights is one of
homelessness,
those?
for example.
Oh,
Homelessness is not a
that's a good
national
example.
policy priority for the federal government, in my
I would
opinion.
completely disagree with
Now
that.
it
And that's
can be
Actually.
fine.
solved at a national level,
Oh,
and
okay.
Unlikely,
Yeah.
but
there is some
unlikely,
policy
but
you need
still.
to put forward,
Well,
to have consistency. If
you would
So
you
want to look at pre-Reagan era when it was going and working towards being solved, and Reagan decided to cut all the federal housing programs. Or I shouldn't say cut, but severely slack and low.
Reagan can't cut those, first of all. Second, he had a Democratic-controlled Congress. So we have to give credit where credit is due, and that's not on Reagan. So, and
It
that's
was
always the case,
You
right?
did a good job cutting them here in California, I'll tell you that.
Well, a
So,
lot of the federal funding for homelessness was cut under the Reagan administration. I don't think that, does he get all the credit? No, but it seems like, at least how we have conversations nowadays, that we sure as shit like to label all the credit on or blame onto the president, and it happened under his watch, and you can
oh, I know it's
precipitously watch.
foolishness, though, right, Dustin? I would agree. I think you'd agree that's foolish, right? Okay,
Very
so
much
let's not make
so.
a rhetorical
No,
point then,
exactly. It
right?
was him and the throngs of people who shared his ideology that made it get done.
I
Well,
imagine that would mean Tip O'Neill and the whole crowd of Democrats that controlled Congress would be included in there, yes?
right,
Okay,
Anyone who
and
anyone who was a
regardless,
Reagan neoliberal era, like yeah.
okay,
so
and
Dustin, back to the original point, though. I think
yeah,
the Senate was designed to work to work its will with consensus, okay? And I think the real complaint is not that it's undemocratic, because it's not. The real complaint is that Congress right now is
in
not
your view,
reaching
right?
policy conclusions
Sure.
that Dr. K would prefer, that maybe you would prefer, or that the folks in chat
No,
would prefer.
I,
That's
I
what I
would.
think is really stoking this,
Bitch, I
because I
would have
think
been calling this same shit out under LBJ. Like, what
so.
do you want?
Well,
So complaining about not working is really just a proxy for saying it's not resulting in specific policies that I prefer, right?
Nah, that's a
And if we
mischaracterization of
if
me,
we
my
well,
friend.
eliminate something
okay.
like the
Well, then I
Senate,
think that's the
then
mischaracterization that we need
if we
to
eliminate something
slice
like the
through
Senate,
and figure
we're
out.
going to a direct majority rule. And I'm not a big fan of that. Now I know it appeals to the authoritarians in the crowd, right?
No,
Sure.
Because they want New
yeah,
York and they want
Switzerland, famous
California to lead the
authoritarian
way.
man.
And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
if we
So,
can't, so
so
it's not working because the two political parties or our elected officials are unwilling to compromise on these big questions, right?
correct. I
Okay,
think
that's
is
what's not
is
working. Eliminating the Senate doesn't eliminate that, except that it removes a barrier to majority majority rule or tyranny of the majority. That's what
Yes.
it ensures. And I'm not a fan
Oh,
of that.
fuck democracy, you mean? Damn, that's a great
Says
way to
fuck
relabel
democracy.
democracy.
well. I
Yeah,
don't.
Who's
that's
going to
Okay.
protect you
basically.
from that? Who's
So,
Okay.
but
Well, hold on.
wait a
This
second.
this
Who's going to
becomes
okay, go ahead.
protect you guys? Who's going to
Justin.
protect you guys who claim that transphobia is running rampant in the United States when
Well, that's
racism
why I
Well,
is running
delegate more
rampant?
of the power to the localities, my friend.
Oh, so then we devolve power down to localities. See, you
Well, I
want
want
majority
direct
rule because you think
democracy
it
at
will
the
capture the
smallest level,
policy
first and
outcomes you
foremost.
want,
okay.
right?
I
But you won't actually address the ills of tyranny of the majority.
I mean,
okay. And
transphobia is happening even, what do you want? Like, it's happening either way. In
I
fact,
would
it tends to be very undemocratic
here.
places
Wait.
with
Let's
heavily
just hold on. Let's
gerrymandered
just drop
places where
that.
this kind of
Let's
shit
drop
goes
that, and
wild.
let's actually
But
go
yeah,
to
yeah,
something
yeah.
that'll be a little bit more of a relevant problem as far as like what we can see and happening today. The Colorado River. I don't know how many people are kind of like aware of this, but the Colorado River services and flows through a series of 5 states. Your tyranny of majority would say that if there is a water crisis, at least the way that the treaties are set up between the states right now, the most populous states will get the most water, which does make sense in a lot of different ways, right? More people there, they need more water. Your problem becomes is those smaller outlying areas, those less represented ones, are typically rural farmers. Well, if we look at it from a nationalistic view, those rural farmers, if we could say that, feed America. So are we going to be okay with, Shaq needing to take 7 showers a day? Meanwhile, Jim Bob can't feed the rest of America? These problems and that tyranny of majority are going to start showing up more and more as the climate changes more and more. So it does become very problematic. I'm not saying, I think we all agree that the Senate is broken. Um, I think debate would say that too,
What is
even
broken?
though the Senate,
No, I don't think it's broken at all. I think again, if the Senate was producing policy outcomes and results that you guys preferred, you wouldn't have a complaint.
No, no,
I
no,
was
no,
complaining
no.
about
It's not.
this.
It's not. I don't think our issue is that they're not agreeing with us. My issue, or maybe I should say that my issue, is that they're not producing policy. Period.
But they
That's
are.
my problem.
We see legislative enactments happening every year. So it's producing something.
At record level lows,
Record level lows. What do you mean by record level lows?
as far as like the amount of policy that is
Yeah.
being placed out, as far as
And I
legislation,
Well,
as
I
far
would
as
suggest the
bills
I,
governing copyright infringement or copyright law, that's not being addressed. Bills starting to work us into the technical age. I'm not talking about issues of uh, national security stuff like a
inaction in
secure
these
power
areas
grid.
isn't reflective of something not working. It's reflective that there's no national consensus on what to do.
Yes, that's the point.
Okay.
Those those
And maybe
senators,
maybe
no,
this is not
those
a space for
senators
Congress to
have
even
to
act.
come up with something. It's not we don't agree with. It's not okay.
Hmm.
We're all just going to stand
So
around with
turn
our
off your
fucking
video,
dicks in our
please.
hand.
We turn off your video, please, if you could. Thank you.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, no problem. No
No,
problem. Keep going.
it's not
And I
the
would
issue
also,
of like
Justin, I would also suggest that maybe I would suggest that Congress is broken in a very important way, and that is they are abdicating their legislative authority,
already to the
particularly to
executive.
the executive agencies or
Yes.
cabinet level departments. And so I think that's why we're also seeing a reduction in the amount of legislating that's going
So we
on.
do agree that the congressional branch is broken, correct? And that the Senate would
In a very
therefore have
specific way,
yes, and the
Congress
Senate would
is
therefore
broken.
have to be a reason why the congressional branch is broken.
Well, no,
So
because
it
this isn't
needs to
limited to the Senate. This is both the House and the Senate, officials in both abdicating their authority to legislate.
okay, but the legislation needs to happen, and that's the problem. As far as I'm concerned, that's the
Um,
issue.
I would like to say something.
Yeah,
When
man.
you say broken, do you mean like dysfunctional, or do you specifically mean that it's just inefficient?
I would say dysfunctional. Efficiency isn't. If I would say that if when I think of efficiency, I would say that efficiency would go along with what I believe would be personally correct. I don't care about what I believe is personally correct. When I say broken, I mean dysfunctional, as in they do not pass the legislation that is necessary for the times for a specific reason.
I would like to argue that our Senate is dysfunctional by design, and it is doing exactly
Yes,
what it was
friend.
designed to
Welcome
do,
to the
which is
conversation.
which
Right.
is to do
Let him
nothing.
speak, please.
Which is to do nothing. And
That
that
is
if you actually want more legislative progression, like what you'd like,
Mhm.
it would probably require a constitutional convention or an amendment of some sort to restructure Congress to sort of be a more
Yeah, correct.
multi-party entity similar to what Europe has.
Sure, but that's not what I want. I think that the system, what I would say, as somebody that believes that the Senate can work, that the system is dysfunctional just because of what's happening right now. And it is not by design, because what you will not find is finding any founding fathers who set up the system, if that's what we're kind of like going with as of right now, that said no legislation should get passed. You will also not find any mention of the goddamn filibuster. The fact that legislation is not being passed is not by design.
So
It
that's
is by function of factions, or what we now know as
uh,
parties.
I actually agree with you partially there. The founding fathers definitely did not want us to be as divided as we are today. The
Sure.
problem is the modern era by design has made an inefficient constitution more divisive than it should have ever been. And in my opinion, our constitution is just obsolete. It's not equipped for the modern problems of today. And you probably need a better parliamentary system to tackle modern nations today, such as globalization and all the economic problems that
Well,
exist.
I mean, Britain's a parliament and it's fallen apart at the seams too.
yeah.
So
And so I
not-
don't
it's
think
not
that,
just being a
No,
parliament saves it.
it's not a
Yeah.
parliament. Britain is not a parliament. But it's not a parliamentarian
No.
system. You're
No,
not
it's
talking
not.
about a parliamentarian system.
Yeah, it's
No.
It's a
actually
different system.
Anglo
All
states
right, France is
actually
falling apart at the
Ang-
seams. It's a parliament.
No,
Anglo.
it's not.
Okay, listen, buddy. Anglo states that are kind of derived from common law, such as the United States, Canada, and Australia, have worse parliaments than countries
Greece
such
is a
as
parliamentary
Germany
system.
and the
It's falling
Scandinavian
apart.
nations.
So listen up. So the branch of like the US is like a branch of common and civil law. So when you talk about common and
That's
civil law,
true.
that's it. It's intertwined.
Uh,
And when you talk about like the UK, it like the US took much from the UK, but it took also a little bit from other continental systems, right? And when you talk about like a parliamentary system, you're talking about like a multi-party system within like European countries like the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Germany, those kind of countries.
Greece.
Not Greece, whatever. You're not talking about like dual party systems or that kind of stuff. You talk about like
So is it the actual showing of more than two parties that's the
yeah, so
qualification for the
mostly because of the fact that if you talk about that thing, right? If you have like two parties within your own system, those things will work out a bit within other systems as well. So the judicial system has like ramifications of having like a dual party as well.
yeah,
Because of the
sure.
fact that right,
But
and
but
and and,
would you not
and
find?
executive and when you talk about the executive order, right, it's like completely different from like a parliamentary system as well.
yeah,
So these things are just not aligned. So when we're talking about like more the
you want me to-
continental system of Europe, right, compared to the US, is like completely different.
so like the main
Yeah.
difference between Senate, a Senate constitution versus a parliament constitution is that Senates and the presidential system tend to have more checks and balances, where people can sort of check one another to stop each other from doing anything. On the bright side, that it greatly helps prevent totalitarianism. On the downside is that you can't provide the needs of the people because there's always going to be an entity to stop it. This is why America is so falling back on positive rights such as healthcare and welfare, while states like Europe, which has more power concentrated in their parliaments, is able to pass much more because it has a few less red tapes for checks and balances.
I mean, an enterprising general can coup a parliament or a presidential system just as easily. I'm just gonna, put that out there. Doesn't really stop authoritarianism. That said, that is sort of the key issue, and I've written a lot about this. Is essentially,
What's the name of the book?
I didn't write a book. I write research papers and get them published in the Political Science Journal of America.
Well, I want to know where I can find them then, because I want to read
So-
it.
Political Science Journal of America, I think 2017 issue. Anyways, so with the two-party systems of America, right? If you have an ideology in a parliamentary system, there's probably a party that encompasses your ideology somewhere. Obviously, that's not true in the United States. There's two parties that kind of have a monopoly, ideologically speaking, on the conversation, right?
But you still
so
see
what-
those
so-
parties like
so what
align
hap-
in a
so
fair
what-
amount of
so
way,
what-
though, correct?
Yes, I'm getting to that, my friend. Thank
Okay.
you. I'm sorry to snap at you.
It's all right.
So what happens is the parties become, and they literally call themselves this, big tent parties, right? Where if you are an ideology that does not fall under the two, party systems, you have to just figure out which one do you agree the most with, and sort of coalition with them in that party. You see this with progressives and democratic socialists in the Democrat Party, and
Sure.
you see this with fascists and white nationalists and such in the
Ye-
Republican
I don't
Party,
think
right?
Yeah.
that doesn't
Libertarians,
seem-
fine, if that makes you all happier, right?
Yeah,
Well,
it's
just don't fucking choose
So
such inflamed language.
I'm gonna
You can
add
go
to this later.
conservatives.
all right. I mean, you can call some Strom Thurmond something else if you want, or you know. Anyways, getting back to the point at hand, right? Is so the two ideologies sort of coalesce into the two party, or all ideologies coalesce into one of the two
Sure.
parties, and so they find nominal representation within our systems, right? And the problem is it's literally impossible to make headway if you are a third party in the United States without some unbelievably unprecedented circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add
And so,
something to that?
well, so what I would sort of advocate for, right, is Japan does something very interesting, and I have a lot of critiques to be made of the Japanese political system since it essentially functions as a one-party state.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing they do that is in one of their houses, I forget which one, is when you're doing your voting, you can also vote. You vote for a candidate, but you also vote for a party, right? And if that party gets enough stuff, you basically get a free dude out of it, right? And so that's a good way of doing that. Ranked choice voting, of course, is important, and I think one of the big innovations in democracy that needs to be implemented.
I'm actually
Um,
against ranked.
yes,
Can
of
I
course you would be.
go
Yeah.
back to more of like a formal question about how they actually do it? When you vote for a candidate and then you vote for a party.
Yeah,
It's kind of, okay.
I
So then, who does the party then
You
vote
you elect
within?
two candidates, right? You're electing a candidate
Candidate?
from you're
Like the
electing like
individual, right?
Yoshimori, right? He's your candidate guy you're putting.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just a name,
yeah,
Yep.
I mean, I
I
don't.
right? And then
I'm
you're
not.
also voting like JCP, and so
I mean, I
JCP.
like. I'm sorry. I don't want to go too far into this. My audience doesn't know what this is.
True.
My
True.
this is gonna be very boring for them, and they're gonna leave. So please, let's focus on something else. Only
The
Facts TV.
financial
Thank you for
Yeah.
incentives
being here.
must
Only
flow.
Facts
all right.
TV. Go ahead.
So
Only Facts TV. Only Facts TV. Thanks.
I'm against ranked
Only
voting.
Facts
Only
TV.
facts.
Oh, never mind.
Shut the fuck up, bitch.
No,
Um,
you don't have to say
so
that. Go ahead. Only Facts, please.
Yeah.
I came in with a point, but it's kind of
Just keep.
not
Just
off
say it.
topic. But
Just say it.
yeah, I was
Go on.
I was just reading about how the idea of the Senate was basically a way to get buy-in from the states from smaller states that they would
Yep.
never be overshadowed. I don't know if you guys covered that, but
Yeah,
I
that was
find
why
that
it was originally a thing.
Yep.
yeah, and I was gonna ask if anybody sees a dynamic between this idea of property ownership equals votes, because sometimes I would compare the Senate to, like, let's say you live in a neighborhood and there's, like, say 50 houses, right? And it doesn't matter if a house has 10 people in it or one person in it. At the HOA meeting, everybody has one vote, right? So
Sure.
in that sense, it prefers property ownership or over actual population representation. So it's representation of property over
Yeah, it's
population. I don't know
oligarchy.
if that's right, but it's an idea I was
Yeah,
going
for
on.
Absolutely
me,
not.
like for me personally, like
No,
I
no.
found it like really interesting, just because of the fact that when you look at like agricultural means, right? Right now we can have like really extreme big farms going on and that kind of shit, and those farms have like a big like massive area. They have like the cultural like agricultural like areas and that kind of stuff, but they are fairly like isolated from like cities and that kind of stuff. I would say that agricultural areas right now are overrepresentative when it comes to within the United States. That being said, I think that there is something to be said that they have some sort of say that make them more representative compared to urban areas. But right
Yeah,
now,
they
I
already
think
have that lobbying.
they are way more overrepresentative. Yeah, you can go to lobbying, but yeah, that's
Well, that
like
was
a
his
different
point.
talk
That was
about.
his point, to
Yeah.
agree with you, not to disagree.
Exactly.
I would only quibble with OnlyFacts' suggestion that about again why the Senate
Absolutely
exists,
not.
right? And again, we have to remember before the 17th Amendment, right? How were senators selected?
By their state,
By their
by
states,
their
and
governor,
why
Yeah, that's
and why was
bad.
that the case?
because
Because it
Right. I
was the
mean,
state's
Oh,
vote.
it was entirely to act as a buffer against centralized government. That's why the states had this appointing authority
well,
to
do you
one
also
house of
want the vice
Congress.
president become? Do you want the person that gets second to become the vice president in that case? Then
No, I'm not arguing for going back. What I'm suggesting is that OnlyFacts had given a premise for the Senate, and I don't think that's entirely accurate because when we go back and look at how the Senate was initially organized, how it was populated before the 17th Amendment, it
hmm
makes sense that it was a bulwark against centralized government. It was a bulwark against the majoritarian factional swings and lurches of the population.
sure.
That's why it existed. And I think it's doing its job well now. Incrementalism is a good thing. And when Congress isn't doing a whole lot, I'm actually happier because it means they're not intervening in my life as much.
Incrementalism means we fall behind China in like world power and prestige, and they become the
No, no,
Very,
world
no, no,
very,
no, no,
hegemon.
no, very,
no,
very much so. Yeah.
not at all.
Yes. No. 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 None of this.
Okay,
No. 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 Very,
okay.
very
So,
much so.
rather than a general appeal to falling behind specifically, what in our organization of Congress is holding the U.S. back from keeping
Look
up
at
with
our
China?
ability to pass infrastructure, for instance. The
Correct.
fact
Right, but wait,
incrementalism
passing
on
bad
infrastructure
infrastructure
is a
legislation
bad
doesn't help.
idea. No, we need to be spending fucking big on infrastructure. Have you seen that? Did you see the fucking bridge collapse? Like, what are you talking about?
But
Look
when
at the
less than
fucking look at high speed
oh, I
rail.
see. Fixing our
We
bridges
have
is what's going to help us surpass China. No,
yes,
that's
because it's for
illiteracy right there.
economic activity. That's how trade happens.
Oh, we build more bridges that increases economic activity at the
It-
local level, and
hey,
we
debate
surpass
board.
Yes.
China. You guys got to help me understand
Debate
this.
board. I wanted to. I
Yes.
wanted to run this by you. So you always mention the original intent and the original philosophy and the original sentiment behind these sorts of things, but is there not a point in our evolution as a country where we can say, yeah, it was X, Y, and Z for being against a bulwark of centralization, but today senators are basically
Yeah.
pawns for corporate interests?
Conditions are
Like,
different.
exactly. So like we don't we there's a big we don't live in this static environment. It's very dynamic and things have changed over 250 years. And now you have senators that, like, Cinema doesn't even meet with her people that vote for her and will take meetings with Facebook or whoever. So is there not something to be said about maybe we should rethink this organization of government as it functions, as it pertains to corporate power, corporate influences? And I know you may want to say that I am overstating the
No,
influence
no,
of
No, he'll
Only
corporations, but
agree
it's
facts,
a
with you.
only
corporation.
facts, only facts.
He'll
I just
agree
want to
with
say,
you.
like, who likes from the public? Like, if you talk about just a normal guy on the street, who likes Facebook? Nobody likes Facebook. Like, we
No,
hate these fucking big corporations. This is not
But
a
they're the one,
thing. Like, this doesn't work. Like, if you talk about Facebook,
right?
nobody likes Facebook, right? So
But here's the thing: is what I'm saying is the senators are doing the bidding of these companies. So I
and
mean,
he's not going to
so
disagree with you on that one. That's well. Don't let me
okay,
you
okay.
start.
I'm just trying to throw in some wrenches here. Like, yeah, I don't know what you
I
guys
mean,
think of it.
I'd take majoritarian rule over minoritarian rule any day,
I
You
don't know.
which is what we
explain
seem
that.
to be in right now.
Okay.
Debate. Would you want to answer OnlyFacts' question? So I don't want to look like I'm fucking talking for you, man. Sorry.
Well,
It's
no,
okay.
but
It's
I mean,
like
I think where the direction I think OnlyFacts, his reason or logic would take us is that if cinema is a representative example of our members of Congress, then why have members of Congress at all? So the problem with people like cinema is not the organization of Congress; it's the actual character of the people who are elected there.
Okay. Yeah.
It seems to be a trend. It seems to be a trend that we're getting the Mitch and on both sides.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Like,
And that would
incentivization of bad behavior.
and
Yeah.
OnlyFacts,
But
I would
that's the
suggest
problem.
that the reason
Oh,
that's happening is is primarily because the federal government is getting so expansive and getting so involved in our personal and private lives, right, business or at the individual level, that people have no other recourse other than to petition their government, right, to
It's the
associate
smallest
and
it's
lobby
been
their
since the
government.
70s.
Pardon me?
It's the smallest it's been since the 70s.
What do you
Like
mean
the entire
smallest?
trend of the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010 has been cutting government spending and limiting the power of the government in everything except military action, of course. Because,
That's not
love the troops.
that's not the case at all. I mean, the federal government now employs more people than it ever has before.
Yeah, because the
The budget is
population's
bigger
bigger.
than it's. What? You just
As
said it was
populations
smaller.
grow, yes, you.
So now you're saying it's
Then
bigger.
it wasn't the 70s? No. That's just not
Yes,
true.
yes.
Well,
The
okay.
federal government is not physically reducing in size. Its scope of power is ever. Let's just look at the evolution of interstate commerce clause and its abuse across the country.
Well, yeah, but
Come
that's a
on, man.
worldwide trend. Every
Regardless of that
government
excuse,
everywhere.
it's still indicative of growing federal government power.
Okay,
And
but
therefore, there's a reason why businesses and individuals want to lobby the government. It's to protect themselves from the government, whether it's regulation, taxes,
make
or other
money.
policies. If we
What?
actually, in a practical way, reduce the scope of government, there'd be no reason to actually lobby the government because there
Okay.
wouldn't be taxes to be imposed. There
Exactly,
would
and
not
I
Yes, you
can't
would
be
be
lobby the
lobby-
regulations to
corporations that would take its
impose.
place.
There you go.
Debate, bro.
Or your feudal lord.
You seem
Like-
to be.
Here's the thing, right?
saying-
If
That's not an
government is
argument for
gone,
no government.
if government is gone, right? Not gone, but let's say it's got to nationalize
Small enough so
something.
you could drown it
It's
in
got
a
to
bathtub.
nationalize something, right? It's got to nationalize business, right? I, as a voter, can essentially say, "Hey, nationalize business. Can you do things this way, right?" And vote for people who will say, "We'll do things this way," right? If it is then privatized and sold off to a corporation, I have no fucking voice in what it does. I have absolutely no say.
So what you're
Especially if
suggesting
it
then
becomes
is
a
there should be all
monopoly.
government authority and all governmental power. What should
I
be
mean,
left to the private
that's
sector?
one way to fix the
So-
problems, but
Okay,
I don't
so
like
we've
that
exposed
way.
that. Okay.
Debate board. My main
please.
complaint. My main complaint for what you're saying is you're essentially acknowledging what everyone here acknowledges, which is that the government is inefficient or ineffective, and then your solution to that is to make the government
I do
more
not acknowledge that,
ineffective.
by the way.
To make the government more ineffective so that it gets even less done. Like if you leave things to the localities, then you have a smaller pool of resources to draw from, and then you can't handle national widespread problems such as the
I
pandemic.
mean, I do like big localities like California and Texas. That's kind of cool.
Well, I think
Because
so.
then you have
Axel, I
localities big
appreciate
enough
that.
they can do stuff.
I think I would rather have a much smaller, more highly competent and effective federal government than an expansive one that doesn't, frankly, work very well.
Exactly. The famous people who are against
But-
competence.
But do you acknowledge that inevitably, if you have a smaller government,
What is
then
that,
there's
Dr.
going
K?
to be
I mean,
there's
what
going
is
to be
that?
less unified resources and yet
Stupid
less
shit.
Saying you're speaking far
widespread.
too broadly for anything.
Yeah, it's a non-statement. Like, who is against fucking competence in government? The only thing you said there that anyone would say they are against is the size
Libertarian.
of it, and like that depends, right? It depends on what you need to get done. If you want a modern railway system that can compete with China and Russia and these countries you claim want to destroy things and do evil stuff or whatever, right? Well, guess what? If you try to do that at a local level, you're going to get horrible redundancies and you're going to have an overall ineffective system, right?
The point that I was
It
making
depends
was not
on what you're trying to get done.
the point
And
I
a
was
lot of
making
times it
with
is good to
a
do it at a
smaller, more
national level.
effective government wasn't just to throw out a non sequitur or
Okay, so a
generalize
smaller
nonsense. The
and then
point
effective
that
is kind of a
Hold
we
on,
see,
you gotta let
we
him finish.
see the federal government engaging in spaces where the federal government just isn't equipped to be very effective. For
such
example,
as
Well, wouldn't the
education.
solution to
Okay.
centralize it
So,
more to make it more effective?
education.
Hold on, stop.
Yeah.
Let him give the example and flesh it out, and then go.
For 30 years, we've been pumping billions of federal government dollars into education under the guise that the federal government ought to be supporting K through 12 education. Correct? Correct.
Yeah.
Where are we? Where are we? Are we any further than we were in the 60s or 70s with school achievement, scholastic achievement? No, we are not. That is because
I mean,
the
we've
federal
been
government is
defunding a lot of
not
our school
tool.
districts.
The federal government isn't defunding school districts. Voters
No,
are.
no, but at a locality.
Actually,
Governments
it's
are.
worse because
It's big
localities are
Yes.
defunding
Okay,
school
so
districts.
the point is that the federal government doesn't possess all-knowing competency in all areas, and that we ought to focus its
no one
competencies in
does.
specific areas, such as national security, national defense, border control, immigration, large priority policies, right, that are of a national
Like
scale.
education.
Well, no, in our
I want a nationally
country-
standard curriculum, yeah.
no, because we see what national standards do. They fail. We've tried.
Yeah, they
national
don't teach
standard after
evolution
national
in schools,
standard.
for example.
We
That's
don't.
That's a
I
non
mean,
sequitur.
We
It's
don't
irrelevant.
have a nationalized curriculum. We kind of privatized a lot of our
Yes.
schools. That's why you have charter schools now.
Yeah, I
In
would
fact,
like a nationalized
education
curriculum.
is a really good example of how localities have failed schools. Like everything is kind of dictated by localized taxes, which leads to inequalities in standards of education across all these localities. You just advocated for we need more localities, but you're showing that localities have failed.
Exactly.
Thank you.
The federal government has attempted to establish national standards over national standards over national standards over national standards that states
you
and
talking
localities have
about-
adopted, and we are still no further along than we were 30, 40 years ago. Okay.
Well,
So, and yes, you can also argue that states and local communities have also failed, right, at providing education. So we have federal failure for 40 years. We have state and local failure for the same amount of time, right? How is that an argument for more expansive federal government participation?
Well,
in
what's
public
your
education?
argument for
I'm
corporate
not
access?
For expanding it.
I am.
Just go ahead.
I mean, how is that an argument for expanding it?
So you want to privatize it, yes?
No,
Is
not
that-
at all. I'm just wondering
Then-
how 40 years of federal government failure, despite imposing standard after standard after standard, has failed.
Okay,
How that is
how
an
are you
argument for more
qualifying
expansive
that?
What's the
participation.
fix to this then?
Okay.
In your eyes?
My fix to this would be for
Well, I'm
federal
not
government.
asking you. I'm asking
okay.
debate.
No, don't worry.
Yeah,
We'll
my-
get to you, Axel. I promise. We'll get to you.
It is to abandon the pedagogical approaches that we've used from education schools since about the 1980s.
What does
where we-
pedagogical mean?
Instructional management, instructional approaches, right?
Okay, thank
you. And where we see an abandonment of I guess I would say traditional 3 R's, right, into more kind of, and this would be conservative-ish kind of speak, a more
What are
social
the 3
engineering
R's?
type of education, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic, right? And using classrooms
Writings with a W.
and using
Classrooms.
Stop. All right.
and using classrooms as tools to gain social outcomes, right? And that's, quite frankly, for me, that's diverted our
Reading,
attention
writing,
from
and
actually
arithmetic
instructing
is
children.
also a social outcome, by the way.
All right.
Well,
Sorry,
guess what?
did you
We're
get your
not an
point?
island.
Hold on, debate board. Did you get your point out? I want to make
Yeah,
sure.
go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
And then you can respond that I do want to hear from Axel. He's been waiting quite patiently.
So,
Well,
so here's my advocacy for more centralized government. And the situation I would do if I were like a president with executive power is I would start creating more grant pools for every state to draw on, typically based on their population, and then I would try to give equal funding for each school in each locality so that there's not that inequality that happens when funding is tied to local taxes, because that to me
Oh,
is
that sounds like wealth redistribution.
it is. And from there, I would raise standards and make required standards in order to gain access to these grants, such as raising the pay for teachers or providing free lunches for people, something like that. We can basically have pools of money for schools to draw from on the condition that you raise the standards of your teaching and the education you give to students.
Careful.
That-
This sounds like no child.
I mean,
Left
they may
Behind.
need that money to improve those standards, though. So
I think
careful
there
you
should
don't
be a
take
litmus
feedback loop,
time.
but otherwise, lovely.
Well, this
there
again
should be a
sounds
lead
like an
time
appeal
of,
to
like-
the federal government simply because
I mean,
the federal
what's
government has a
really
deep
great
pocket. That's it.
about
That's
living
what the
on
argument
a
is.
planet like planet Earth, right? Is that we don't exist as an island, bereft in space. We have neighbors, and so we can look at neighbors who, are similar to us, who are doing well in the field of education, and
You
say,
can't.
what are you doing there, neighbor, that works so well for you? And then you look at that and you can start to adopt that into your own system. It's
Hello,
really
Dr.
cool
K.
like that.
Hello, Dr. K. As a neighbor, I want to just say, like, first
Wait,
of all, as a neighbor of the US, I wanna say,
Canadians.
no, I'm not Canadian, but another neighbor, a European, right? Even worse.
Even
But
worse.
yeah. So yeah, I just want to say, first of all, I think that the property tax and that going to schools and that going
Yeah, it's
into
fucked.
schools is super stupid. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
It makes a lot of sense
This,
if you think about the incentives.
It's a whole revenue system.
it's just cringe overall. You gotta have it on a national level. You gotta just fund that through a national level. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Do that. Don't the tax property, that kind of stuff. You know that the rich kids are going to get a more better like education and that kind of stuff. You know that's gonna happen, and
Do they not have
that's
private
not what we're.
schools in Europe?
And not in my country. They are outlawed. So yeah. So yeah, there you go. But anyways, so that being said, like yeah, I think it's super cringe. So don't do that. Don't fund taxation for rich kids, rich schools, that kind of stuff. It's kind of weird. So you gotta work on that, and then you can solve those issues to make things more equal for everybody
If
all
if
around.
only solving the education problem in the U.S. could come down to throwing more cash at it. We know that's not true. We know that's not the case.
I'm not
thing
saying
that's
that.
not what we're
I'm not
doing.
saying that.
No,
I
but
wasn't
Yes, it
saying
is.
that.
It precisely is what was
No,
being said
I
earlier when we
actually
said
I wasn't
we
saying
need,
that.
we need to have.
redistribution.
I specifically said have pools of cash available for schools that need it, as well as raising standards and requirements to gain access to that cash. So,
Right, it's using
and
the
that
federal
would
government
also,
as a bag of cash.
and the onus would largely be
That's
based
what
on the
you want a federal
locality.
government
So it's
for.
a mixture of local responsibility from federal funding. So that's pretty inefficient, and that's pretty efficient in my opinion.
So let's let in a new individual here. Hello, Bob Barker. Hello, hi, how are you?
Hi, how's it
Huge
going?
fan. Huge fan.
Yeah, The Price is Right was a real success.
Yeah, he's
wasn't it?
dead. But anyway, it's from out in the grave. But yeah,
He
please.
went out on top.
That's true. That's actually quite true. Bob,
Were you in
please,
chat the other day?
tell us what you think.
I actually was listening in, and Dr. K, I actually had kind of a issue with something that you said. So you were saying that you want a nationalized curriculum. Is that what you said, right?
Yeah, if it was. Now, obviously, there are certain things that obviously should be taught state by state. For example, I actually quite like that we teach individual states' histories, right? Whereas if you're in California, you learn California's history. If you're in Texas, you learn Texas's history, right? Like that, I like. And that, yes, obviously, there's going to be some stuff that needs to be regionalized. But on the whole, math, for instance, doesn't change across borders. And the majority of what we teach doesn't change, based on where you are. And so for non-social sciences, yeah, I do want a more standardized situation.
Right. So I completely disagree with that idea. I think that idea
Okay, that's valid.
it would not make any improvement in any of our public school system. Specifically speaking, right? Like we know for a fact that like nationalized systems, including like let's go back to the Common Core. Okay, when Common Core was implemented for the first few years, it did quite all right. However, as time went on, we know that Common Core has produced major inequity in schools.
But
Well, you know that
did,
Common
did it
Core is-
produce them, or did it exacerbate the ones that already existed due to the
Common Core,
inequity
by the
of
way,
funding?
Common Core was only a standard. It wasn't like saying you
It is
will do
it is a
this.
standard. It is a standard, but it raises the standards for students to succeed. It's not the way that school should be ran.
Well,
So
no, Common Core just states like a sixth grader should be able to read at this level. You should know math at
Exactly.
this
it
level.
raises the what's it called? It raises the expectation of how a student should be exceeding in school.
So should a sixth grader in Ohio be more well read than a sixth grader in California?
No. However, I do think that a students should not be what's the word, expected to learn at
Right.
a super fast rate. Like no student should be in a grade and be said or be told by a teacher or an administrator or by curricula in any sense or any standard in sense that they must perform to a higher expectation because that's what Common Core states.
Well, this
That's
would
not.
be in this idea, your common core would be or your teachers would be perfect, so we would throw out the social aspect, right? Because if we don't say that teachers are perfect, then we can't have it like a I always agree with perfect teachers. Common Core just specifically says you have to be able to do this. If you want to talk about how different students learn on different levels, I'm completely fine with that, totally agree. But at a standard of if you don't pass, your ass is still fucking there until you get there.
Not to mention brain fart. Never mind. Carry
Hold
on.
on.
Go
I
on.
think you muted yourself there, Bob. I see your mic kind of
Oh
going.
no, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Um,
Ah,
no,
yes.
okay. So anyway, continuing on with the curriculum idea. Okay, um, I don't think a nationalized curriculum is going to work in any sense, and the reason for that is every single school is different, in how they
Yes.
approach
No,
teaching and
that's the
learning.
thing. That's the great part is you can have specialized schools for specialized type of students. I am very autistic. I went to a specialized school, right, that had a different curriculum due to having a different demographic, right? I'm simply stating that for the standard student body, right,
Yeah,
then you should
standards.
try to standardize.
I
So,
I
and
uh
my point on that is I don't genuinely believe that if we have a nationalized curriculum, right? So
Mm,
let's start with okay, one of the largest high school districts in the United States, the Phoenix Union High School District. It's in Arizona. Has
I'm
student
familiar.
population of what is it like 29,000 students,
Go Cougars.
largely in an urbanization area, right, or an urban area,
Yes.
but also has some schools that are in suburban areas, right? The
Yes.
curriculums that are taught in Phoenix Union vary per the social class that students are living in because of the fact that students have a different advantage as to how they learn, or they
What
have
do you mean
different
by social
ways,
class?
like socioeconomic status. So
How
the
wealthy?
students in the impoverished community have a different way that they learn the curriculum. Um, Someone who is upper middle class in a suburban community.
Why?
uh
Have they
so
had good results?
Yeah, they've been doing
Why?
that for the past 35 years.
But
So
why do they do that?
Why do they do that?
Yes.
Because they know that every single school is different and that there's always going to be a different pattern of learning. They
Mm.
know that a student that
I mean
is,
that's one thing I advocate for is giving teachers way more leeway to teach how they want. Like have a standardized curriculum, but let the teacher teach that standardized curriculum the way they want to.
So maybe you could help me out here. I feel
Hmm.
like I'm very confused. So they separate them out. Is this per school by socioeconomic
yes,
status?
for
Okay,
school.
so
Yeah,
rich neighborhood school, poor or middle class school, poor neighborhood, right?
yeah, like low income.
Low income. Okay, sorry. Um,
isn't that tracking?
isn't that the same exact thing that we have right now? Like, there's got to be something more that intertwines it that I'm just not grasping, right?
So
Because
I
if they're all funded through your local property tax, I'm confused why that
it leads to a
would be
negative
different.
feedback loop if you do that.
Well, he's saying
yeah,
that they have good
exactly.
results. So, can you help me? Why is that different?
Wait, what was your question? What's your general question?
Well, like you basically said that a school is better by sort of categorizing kids based on their socioeconomic status, right? Because they
Mhm.
can meet the needs of those specific groups.
Yep.
But that to me sounds a lot like one, what we already have, which is poor people get poor education, and two, tracking, where teachers and people sort of categorize students as this group is going to be worse off, so we're not going to be as dedicated towards those groups, which already happens on the psychological level.
I mean, I personally don't see it as that. I don't think it's necessarily a poor student gets a poorer education, and then a student that's in an upper class neighborhood gets a better education at all. I mean, Phoenix
We
Union
can
has
see those
literally.
numbers.
Yeah, I'd
But,
like to see
I'm
the
saying
study.
specifically sticking inside of Phoenix Union, right? Specifically sticking inside of Phoenix Union. I don't see that as a
You don't.
um,
There's not a discrepancy in test scores, or
what Bob is saying, that those people got lucky, even though they are poor.
well, hold
That's
on.
basically what you're saying.
Well, I don't think he's saying that. I think he's saying that the. And again, I'm not trying to fucking put words in your mouth. I think what you're telling me is that each social economic fucking Christ, each socially economic class, so through affluent, middle income, and then lower income, have their own type of schools.
mhm. They
Correct?
have their own type of ways that they teach. Basically, it's the same type of curriculum.
Is
However,
it
they have different ways that they teach the curriculum that meets the needs of the students. So, for instance, right, if you have students in a lower socioeconomic status, right, all in one
sure?
classroom, 40 kids, right, and we
Right.
know by statistical whatever, right, that these students are living in houses that don't have attention from parents. They can't function properly as much
So
as
the
an
teaching techniques
Hmm.
are going to be different.
right, exactly. But they're still
Okay.
going to be learning the same type of curriculum.
Sure.
However, it's not going to be able to be taught in the same way each and every time. That's why I don't think a nationalized, I guess, like
Okay.
curriculum.
Every
So are
school
those
district does that. Like,
Yeah, but so this is my question, what makes this area different? Are the amount are the funds and resources given to the teachers to carry out that task the same?
I think they would be to get positive results because it would be ridiculous if
Well,
poor
I
teachers
don't
had
need you to
poor.
think, I need Bob to answer.
hmm
I don't actually know. I don't
Okay.
necessarily know what the funding behind it goes to.
Yeah. Well,
Is that
and
is like a very good question as to is the funding the same or does the
sure.
lower income schools
Look,
get less funding or more
because I
funding?
want aggressive redistribution.
right. Like, look, I don't think anybody is like going to sit here and disagree with what would work, right? I think the questions that we have is ensuring that everybody has that opportunity as far as an equal education and
hmm
achievement in that education. I don't want just because you go to a poor school, you don't know how to work with Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word. And because you go to a rich school, you're actually well above Microsoft Excel. You're actually building computers, you're programming, right? Like those discrepancies are what we're trying to eliminate. And I guess my questioning towards you is, are those same opportunities there because the resources are allocated in a even or equitable way? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm actually gonna get
Okay.
back to you on that because I'm actually gonna look up the budget right now and
Dude,
see
yeah, like fucking
because I'm actually now I'm even more curious onto that point at exactly as
yeah.
to yeah.
And I
hmm
look, I'm a Democrat, so I'm pretty federalist, so I'm very kind of I mean, I grew up during 9/11. I don't know what the fuck you want from me. We're all
This'll work,
Yeah,
bro.
We're all
but
Americans, right? Like I think that we don't face enough problems in a sense of unity, in a
but
sense of like this person's from fucking Nevada. He's still an American. He,
but
she, or they are still an American. I don't
it
like this.
doesn't. It
Go
doesn't.
ahead.
I have a question for you. Like,
Sure.
basically, like we talk about like education and like providing for that education. Like, wouldn't it not be better to just have that funded on like a national level and that kind of stuff? Wouldn't that
Yeah.
overall just not be better? Just
Yes.
get all
I'm
the local
correct.
stuff out of there.
Well,
I mean, the
Maybe
with
with some
redistribution should be
without
national.
well,
with some exceptions, maybe because of the fact that the school is within like the neighborhood where the ground is,
maybe this is
like,
the olive branch that you're looking for. As far as like funding would go, then yeah, I would say that. I would say
yeah, overall,
federally.
right?
But what you would need to do, and this doesn't necessarily work for people because this is how our nation is kind of set up. Why would I work so fucking hard to not ensure that my children are in the best schools possible, right? Like, you have to figure out how we deal with that social barrier as a political achievement to do a nationalistic kind of sense of education. That's problematic. that's one of the issues as far as like being the politician out there on the grind, telling people about how we're gonna nationalize education. Some people are gonna be pretty fucking upset about that, and
Yeah,
probably rightfully so.
you talk about like a political pragmatism and like political capital and that kind of shit, right? That's
Correct.
where you're coming from.
Correct.
And I understand that. But from an ideal perspective,
Yeah,
that's
I'll
what you
jerk
want,
myself
right?
off with you. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm all
let's
about
jerk.
that.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
will
dude.
jerk you
Like,
off. You can
yeah,
jerk
like
me off.
the
Oh
old
yeah,
Dutch
yeah, yeah.
rudder. I
Oh
grab your
yeah, yeah,
arm
yeah.
and you grab
Let's go.
mine.
Oh,
See, like,
this is getting hot.
yeah,
Oh,
Ooh.
the
Dr.
old
K,
Dutch
want to
rudder.
join in?
Anybody?
No.
Anybody? No, just me. Like, look,
This
yeah.
is too hot to
So,
tango. Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
You can skip this one for now.
Three's the
yeah.
party.
As a practical ideological manner, yeah, of course. But then we're just sitting here and saying, like, I sure wish things could be so good, and it doesn't work that way. We all wish things could be so good. You gotta figure out how we fuck around and
No,
fix
but
the disagreements.
to be honest, I think there should be some divide because of the fact that when you have like a school within California compared to having that in North Dakota or something like that, like the school in California probably costs somewhat more funding, and you might want
Sure,
to make
yeah.
some difference there. So,
Well, you never want to flood too many funds into a smaller economy because then it becomes a huge economic fucking problem, right? Um, thank you, by the way, debate. We have officially gone away from the Senate and we started talking about education. This is your fault. You fucking did this.
I mean, more funds flowing into a impoverished community is never a bad thing per se, as long as it's done carefully.
Well, you probably have a more higher likelihood of fraud and theft. As far as not even from a criminal standpoint, as just far as like,
Officials embezzling
There are
shit.
correct.
there are
Yeah,
some
that issue.
there are fail safes to that, such as
Well,
having
I'm not
sort of
saying
like
that you could.
like a local commission that's all democratically elected and
Well,
lots of transparency in funds. There are fail
look,
safes.
look. Democracy is not like
It's messy.
it's not necessarily a quote unquote failsafe. I mean, there's plenty of mayors that embezzle fucking funds that are
Well,
democratically elected.
so the thing is, we do have bloating in certain sectors of our country, economically and politically. But when it comes to very bare bones local level things, democratic commissions tend to be the best way to handle things such as corruption.
Well, usually because they don't have a direct access to those funds. They only have allocations. And then you kind of run into what is political corruption, right? Is the member of city council that's super close with all these business folks in their district. Are we going to be surprised if that street is more paved than the slum of his district? It can be very, very problematic.
Well, I mean, I'm with the theory that the higher up in government you go, the more disassociation there is between the politician and the individuals on the ground. And that's why I say, like, on the ground, on a local level, it is much easier to hold local politicians accountable than people at a higher level, which you don't really have too much access to.
Well,
So,
then we're talking about a scale of numbers, and that's kind of like the importance of character, right? Like when Republicans used to care about character so much, they thought it kind of meant something. Um, they
yeah.
thought, if I elect this person of character, we're going to see less problems. I don't know if I necessarily disagree with that idea, but we all have different people of quote unquote character now. My definition of character is different than yours, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I think that within the US, that the way how you guys do it, like decentralization, is very concluded and it's like very extreme, and a lot of people are like being elected, like the sheriff and that kind of stuff, and the mayor and the city council, and everything is elected. But overall, you don't know necessarily that or who is representing you as like a person. I think that's like overall issue.
would you consider
That,
that a public education issue, or would you consider that a too many representatives functional.
I think for me, because you asked me the question, I think that is like personally, like I think like when it comes like the police sheriff, I don't think that should be somebody that should be elected. But when you're talking about
You
like
don't think that should be somebody that should be elected, a sheriff?
no, I think that it's somebody that should be acting under the mayor's
That's
office.
very interesting. Actually,
But that being said, like I think overall the overall interest should be more on our local politics because that's like generally when we talk about like states, the norm and the size of your U.S. state, like within the decentralization that your state has,
sure.
this it makes more sense. The mayor is more important for any American dude, right? Than the fucking president. Within the Netherlands,
No,
it's the
not at
opposite.
all.
I was waiting for you to chime in, debate.
Yeah, that's not the case
I
at
mean, hell, the
all.
mayor of Los Angeles is just straight up a more important political figure than the governor of Wyoming, and I'm willing to put my foot there. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, no,
You're so
of
brave.
course, there are big city mayors that have a ton of power and authority that they can exercise, right, and have a more direct impact on the daily lives of say, the president.
It's crazy. This city that is like 3 times the population of Wyoming has 0.001 or it has point 0.2 senators, right? And Wyoming gets 2. Isn't that funny, huh? Anyways,
Yeah, it's
carry on,
working
gentlemen.
exactly as intended. But
Yeah,
nonetheless,
badly.
I would Chinchilla. I would
Dysfunctional.
agree to you to a certain extent. I did local government back in Michigan, and we had in the state of Michigan alone, we had 18,000 political jurisdictions. All right, once you get through the cities, the counties, the villages, the school districts, the water commission districts, yada yada yada. Yeah, there's a whole lot of democracy going on in the U.S.
Yeah, too
A
much.
government
Too much.
of half a billion?
This is the thing that we have that in the Netherlands as well. We have like the water districts as well, and the water districts and like only like 20% of the people turn up to vote, and that's kind of shit. It's fucking ridiculous. So maybe you should like reform that within like maybe your school districts or maybe
Well, I'll
just
tell
the
you
county
what is
districts or something. But
You know-
that being said, like make certain things like important on the local level. That's what I want to say.
You know, gentlemen, if climate change keeps up, the water districts are going to be all of the Netherlands. Won't that be
Yeah.
fun?
So
Well,
already 60% of the Netherlands is under the sea level. So there you go. So there you go.
Hopefully, soon more will be as well.
We
So,
kind of need to
I
tackle.
wouldn't.
Like, I think
One good side of climate
so much
change.
more can be done on the local level as an individual than on a federal level. And the problem is getting people more involved on a local level in order to sort of push for that political activism.
Mm.
I
Political
largely
education.
I don't think education is a key, because here's the thing about education and political education.
Political education, I'm not talking in the traditional school sense of it, right? I'm talking about like more people just straight up like engaging with it and talking about it like at work and like this getting rid of this fear of like engaging with other people
Yeah, so
and destroying this atomization that's fucking caustic to representational democracy.
So in that case, my question is, how would you get the adult population more involved in local politics than federal politics?
I would start pointing them towards resources like Steve Bannon, because he clearly
bit.
fucking knows that local elections are incredibly fucking important.
Yeah.
And he's talking about how people, I don't know if he's like a full-on Q guy, but he's talking about how people need to start going after these local elections.
I mean, he's
mean
a fascist. Like,
Yeah,
self-admittedly.
and like, where does it start? It starts in those local like city elections, and as far as like city council.
I'm actually oh, I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. Yeah,
I'm actually with the theory that the internet is largely to blame for our inactivity on a local level, because if you think about it, YouTube,
Nah,
Facebook,
that was even true
Instagram.
in the
Think
90s.
think about every social media you listen to right now. It only talks about national level, doesn't talk at all about your local elections. I think we need stronger algorithm systems for localized politics so that people, when they enter social media, they only, at least politically speaking, first and foremost see things related to local news. So
I
they know what's happening in their local area based on the IP you're at and the algorithms of your local IP. And yeah, we should still be able to share national things from one another so that the algorithm considers that. But social media to me is going to be a key point to getting people informed about their localities.
X.
Sorta.
I love that. I love that idea. I love that idea. But this is the thing. You know what sells? Donald
I,
Trump sells.
right.
Biden sells. These
Yeah,
things
you need a
sells.
non-profitly
You,
incentivized body.
and like Valburg in the Netherlands, the town that I grew up in, that doesn't fucking sell, because there was like 20 years ago they built like a train track over there, and that was the only hot thing that happened in the
It
last like
it
40 years or something like that. So it's a bit. I get where you're coming from. I love the idea, but this is the thing that I think when you talk about like political activism, you generally what you're gonna do is like you will drag people in, and you will drag them. They come from like a national or even like international perspective, and you will like indulge them and will like like teach them around like local issues. I
Yeah,
the
and
myself,
like
I
another
myself,
way.
no, but I myself, I've for 8 years or no, for 12 years long, I've been written like programs for for the second party we did the Netherlands right now. I've written like 4 programs on local county levels, like
Mhm.
so yeah. So I've been doing this stuff, but that being said, like it's you gotta drag those people in with like probably with local stuff or with sorry with national stuff. So
Yeah, but
and from
another
there,
great way in order to like start bringing more attention to your local legends is by like subscribing and subbing to this channel. That's
I
a,
would
another
oh,
that's another way by
Bad
supporting Prime Politics.
segue.
the
Yeah, that is actually here allowing conversations like this to take place.
Boo,
So,
get
I
better
mean, Prime,
segues.
so
oh,
Thank you.
just kidding.
Thank you
the
for that.
alg
Much appreciated.
the algorithm thing is definitely secondary to another core issue, which is money in media. Like, as long as we have a profit incentivized media ecosystem, sensationalism is always going to be the first and forefront of every news organization, which is why I'm also an advocate of subsidizing local news stations on a local level of every locality in the country, so that
No,
then you can have
don't subsidize local
non-profit.
shit.
So then you have non-profit entities working from a non-profit standpoint, which will
well, you do know that a
Yeah,
lot
drastically.
like
of your local
PBS.
radio is subsidized, right?
I think we should subsidize more. I don't think
Like
we're nearly as much as we should. I know Canada subsidizes more news than we do.
like just have a national broadcasting system and a local broadcasting systems that you just like you don't have to subsidize a private corporation. Just have your own public one.
You awake,
I
Prime?
think
I'm not.
no, no.
I just prefer taking it to the most drastic level in this
So
case because I really want to
we
remove money from
That is
media.
this is the more drastic level, my friend.
we have like a nationalized system of like national broadcasting, and that's okay. It's good. It's okay. But that being said, like I appreciate like having some subsidies into local like broadcasting as well. I wanna hear about that sheep that went to the France. I wanna hear about that.
Mm.
So because sometimes there actually is happening something, and then it's like actually important. But yeah, whatever.
All right, Bob Barker here is going to give us some huge contention,
Do
and we're all
both.
going to start
I
fighting.
was just all I was gonna say is like, I mean, nationalizing media obviously doesn't work, especially in the United States. I mean, like, look at C-SPAN. Like, raise your hand if you watch C-SPAN.
I watch a lot of PBS actually.
Guys,
PBS
no.
is one of the greatest resources. Now, if you want to say that we're all fucking nerds and losers
Yeah,
that
dude, I
watch a
fucking
bunch of
love
stuff like that,
PBS.
then yeah, of course, I would agree with you.
Hey, raise your
Yeah,
hands
but
if you're a
like, I
nerd.
mean, like,
Rick
how
Steves
many?
Europe, Antiques
Go
Roadshow,
ahead,
my
Bob.
shit.
Bob, give it a
I'm-
I
try.
mean, how many people like outside of like the political like genuine interest in government, right? Like
I
genuinely
agree.
watch C-SPAN and go, I'm gonna watch this so I can get more knowledge on like our government. No, it never happens. And
That's
the reason
not
it
what
doesn't
it's
happen is
there
because
for.
there's
Correct.
no
Yeah.
the reason that private sector media companies become so powerful is because of the fact or like become so influential is not because of the fact that they report the news, it's because of the fact that they report the things that are so crazy. I mean, like the reason that so many people became so interested in politics in the US was because of Trump. He's just crazy. He's this crazy guy that goes out and says the craziest BS
Yeah,
and
living under a
goes on
dangerous
to
man
the
will do
attention of
that
the
to a
media,
bitch.
Yeah, like
gets the attention of the media. So now all that's in the media all the time is politics because of that general factor that it gets them ratings, it gets them attention, it gets them stuff like that. That doesn't happen on the local level that
so.
much.
So this is purely for entertainment purposes. But Bob, has anyone ever told you your voice does not match your face? Like you've
Yeah.
got like an
Yeah, I
amazingly.
get that, like every
Yeah.
yeah.
You look like you have a Let's Play channel.
Yeah. Please, is it going to start?
Okay, that's weird. All right. So anyway, but so does anyone want to respond to what Bob said?
Yeah, like one C-SPAN is it's not like it's for chronicling like the and like then for public transparency like broadcasting these sessions like yes, of course it's not supposed to be entertaining. It's like it's that's not what it's there to do.
Yeah,
Of course it's stiff as a fucking board.
to me
But
the
like
argument.
I will say I am won over to this, right? Is like if the local stuff, right, that gets the good funding is mostly nationalized, right? You can get the thing where you can get, you know, the whole like herder government censorship kind of shit, which fair enough, you know. I that much makes sense to me. So like a little bit of subsidized you know the word I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, of local networks and shit. Like, all right, that's fine enough to me.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that said, like we have instances of publicly controlled or national like broadcasting networks like succeeding in basically every other country. So I don't know what to tell you on that front.
Well,
Like,
succeeding is kind of a loaded word there, and depends, of course,
I don't know. The
primarily on your
BBC
frame
is
of
kind of
mind.
a entertainment juggernaut, would you not say? And obviously, there are a lot of critiques to be made of it, but it's in a stronger and more useful state, let's say, than our own
Oh,
public
sure, but
broadcasting
then you also
systems
have
are.
complaints that it participates in a national surveillance state there, that they are controlled by the government and present very specific points of view, and they
Oh,
are
bro,
subsidized to a
like
heavy extent by
the
the
United
government.
States isn't a surveillance state
That's a
either,
what
though.
that's a
So, like,
whataboutism. Okay, I was just
okay.
presenting to you some ideas about BBC and how that might be
Well,
something
here's the thing.
at
Here's
least
the
to
thing.
acknowledge when thinking
I'm not
about
saying no to
nationalizing these.
private networks. I'm not saying they have to, you know, be executed by a big hammer or something, right? I'm simply saying, you know, you want a diversity of opinions, right? Well, guess what? If all of your information is coming from private corporations, there is an instance there then where you will have a monolithic viewpoint because it's all coming from this kind of institution, right? So if you have a variance of institutions giving you, you know, a variety of information, you're going to get a little bit more diversity in your views, and who knows, might be good for public discourse. Can't get much worse, I'll say that much.
Yeah, if the
We're at the point in the US where like, hey man, let's try some shit. Let's throw stuff at the walls and see what sticks.
Yeah, if the fear is media manipulation, then you can just again go back to creating pools of funding specific for subsidizing local like paper publishing companies so that there's a localized
Nobody reads the
indep-
paper.
an independent entity that provides news for everyone. And that will allow a lot of diversity in voices because you'll have ground level reporters writing up the news for everyone. And the competition would essentially kind of flop in favor of publicly funded news instead of sensationally driven for profit news.
Mm, I I think that you should be having some sort of funding for like news networks, and it can be like local funded, not necessarily like state funded or like even on a federal level funded. But I think like local funded like news would be like a step in a good direction, because I think that could be like unbiased news like pretty easily for everybody. I think like
Hell,
overall when
subsidize union news.
I
Subsidize
think I think
cooperatives.
I think overall when you talk about
Fuck
like
it.
funding like news and that kind of stuff, and you are explicitly like saying like this is going to be biased, I'm not that sure. It's like
Well, we all have
it's like
bias.
really it's really gray, because of the fact that you can also say like because of the fact that there are some shareholders within the BBC, and therefore like those shareholders have like a certain interest and are pushing like a certain narrative and that kind of shit. You know, you can always find like a way to say like these corporations are biased.
Yeah, get money out of it.
These governments are biased. Everything is biased. Everything is biased. Everything
Yes,
has like a
everything
grand
is
narrative.
biased.
Everything has like great narrative. Like I genuinely don't believe in a great narrative, but if you want to go with like oh, just because of the fact that there are some subsidies going to something and therefore it's biased, like you're doing the grand narrative argument. It's silly.
Well, debate. Would you say that we have a problem with politicians kind of diving or avoiding media, like without? Because if we were to go
At least
back
for
in history,
Republicans, yeah.
if we were
Actually,
to go back in
no. There's
history,
plenty
we
of
talked
shit
about
ones.
they talked about the importance of media. Oh, very much so. You know, one of the first professions to be talked about in the Constitution. Um, do you think that there's a place for an amendment, some kind of law talking about politicians needing to have conversations with the media, needing to take appointments, something along those lines, or kind of like, what do you think about
No, not
that?
at all. Not at all.
No?
I think, to be honest, I wish politicians would use social media less and less and less and less. It just breeds just toxicity in how they communicate, not just to
Yeah.
the constituents, which I think is their least important consumer of their social media content, and how they
Mm-hmm.
interact with each other as politicians, and how they stake out these types of positions and views. But no, I would argue strenuously against adopting any federal legislation that requires public meetings with constituents or otherwise. Look, constituents are going to hold their elected officials accountable, and if their elected officials are not meeting with them on a basis that we think is sufficient or appropriate, well, our opinion, quite frankly, doesn't matter. And when their constituents continue to vote them in office despite not meeting with them regularly, well, hey, that's their constituents exercising their privilege to vote and doing what they do. I don't think there's any need for federal laws or amendments or otherwise.
And thus we are cool with the downfall of the United States.
You
Yay!
know,
Yeah, the downfall of U.S. isn't going to be a function of politicians not communicating via Twitter, nor meeting with their constituents as much as we would maybe otherwise prefer.
I'm gonna have to go with
Mm,
Dustin on this one. I actually think laws requiring maybe town meetings with the representative of your county is going to be beneficial to the locality first and foremost. But also, I don't think we should necessarily rely on good faith and expectations for the voters to vote these people out when they're not communicating with their constituents. Because there is a degree of apathy that people have when they're working like 50, 60 hours a week on minimum wage, that they're not going to be politically active enough to know that something is wrong. And I don't think it's necessarily correct to sort of presume that these ineffective politicians will be voted out as soon as there are discrepancies. Like sometimes you do need to compel the people of power to take up more responsibilities for the greater good of the democracy in question.
We have all sorts of federal laws that are
It,
trying to control elected officials' behaviors, and yet we still see elected officials behaving badly. So to enact even more laws to try to compel certain behaviors or incentivize behaviors we think we want to see, I don't think that gets you very far in terms of having a practical effect on how elected officials behave.
Are you aware of what a law is? I can't make a law that says I love you, but I can make a law that says I can't lynch you.
I'm
I
not
love
Right?
seeing
you.
the point.
That'd be a good law. Too bad we've never been able to pass one of those, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
Can
the
you
point
just say to
being,
me to
Wait,
love me?
Dustin, I don't see the point in questioning whether or not I understand the either concept or the purpose of a law. That's just a silly rhetorical question. So tell me your point. What are you
well,
pushing
a
back
very
against?
silly rhetorical statement is saying, like, well, these politicians, we already have all these laws and it doesn't seem to be working right now. Did you ever
Gentlemen,
Yeah.
think maybe we
law.
don't have the effective laws that we would need? One of my senators, who's never really met with his constituents here at all, introduced a bill for that bars representatives, at least at the federal level, from owning and trading in stock.
Mm.
You don't think that a law such as that would be at the very least, um, a some sort of mitigation? It wouldn't do anything.
Oh, no, laws absolutely have a mitigating effect. I think trying to legislate that an elected official ought to meet with their constituents locally, say 5 times a quarter, right,
Sure.
is unnecessary because there are either constituents who are going to say, look, this person is just not reflecting our needs, our wants, our desires, our expectations, and they would choose to run or organize their neighbors or vote differently. They have options other than us trying to legislate these arbitrary
Well, they have one option.
expectations,
They have one option
which is,
to vote.
oh no, they have
And the,
multiple options. You can, or communities all over the U.S. have organized themselves around particular political ideas, wants, expectations, and people actually choose to run for office.
right.
So they have
So
multiple
voting,
avenues.
I don't understand.
Dustin, if you have a problem with your local elected official or your national representative, I'm
Sure.
sorry, elected official not meeting with you or your constituents on a regular enough or substantive enough basis, you
Correct.
can run for office.
Yeah.
Redacted.
You literally
And then
can
I
declare
have to
yourself a
vote
candidate.
them out. Right?
Well,
Oh,
you have
no,
other
you can
options aside
unseat
from
them.
voting, but you know.
That's a separate
Yeah,
activity
I
from
want to know what
voting.
those options are.
I just gave you 3.
You
They're
said
not
voting.
all voting.
What are the other two?
One, of course, is voting.
Right.
Right? The second one is, Dustin, you choosing to directly run for office and unseat that
Which still
incumbent.
requires people to vote.
Yeah, it's still part of the
Oh
voting
my goodness.
system, let's say.
Right.
We're talking about what an individual can do if they are unhappy with their elected official meeting with constituents in that area.
Yes. What are
Well,
the means of
What you can
recourse
do.
aside from voting?
right.
If we're talking about what the district can do, yes, there is voting for somebody else, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
running for office yourself
That's
and
the same
and
thing.
accumulating votes. I'm
That's
not
the
sure.
exact
I
same
think you
thing.
guys are trying to make a distinction without meaning here, maybe. I'm not
Well, I
getting
mean,
it. Run for office if you
you can
don't like
also
it,
protest.
organize if you don't like it, or vote differently if you don't like it. I don't see the difficulty
You
here.
can make your lives fucking miserable if they're a bad enough representative.
Absolutely. Yeah, pick at their local offices. Visit them in DC when you go. Absolutely. Or in your state capital, whoever it is you're unhappy with.
It would seem to me, in the day and age that we live currently, that those methods don't seem to work very well. So the recourse that you do have is to vote. The question and statement that more the question that I'm trying to make is, would you enjoy the idea of a mandate in which they are at least required to go and meet with their constituents? And from my impression, you're saying no, because
No, I don't. No,
should
because
they choose not to engage in that type of vital action that they
Constituents may or
voted
may
out.
not consider that vital.
I'm, I'm
I mean, a part of the problem here, I think, is, Dustin, you're sensing a symptom of a problem, and I think a better approach would be term limits. We should not have career politicians
That's a
Yeah,
at any
terrible
level.
idea. That
No,
no,
is
it's
a
very
not at all.
terrible
short-term
idea,
limits is
and
kind of
I
fun.
will and I
It's
will
only
tell you exactly
terrible.
why.
No, it's only terrible if you if you believe that absent term limits, you have elected officials who aren't competent in a variety of areas to represent us.
Hell,
Yes,
Right?
ad hoc
Right.
politicians.
I
yes,
think that itself is a reflection of an overexpansive government, a government that's
1 month
too
term
involved
limits.
with too much. That, or you need to greatly expand the size
yes,
of
because you
Congress.
have the responsibilities of a lot of broad areas. That's why you have committee assignments. That's why you have all of these things
Absolutely.
within Congress. I do appreciate the fact that you had said that you believe that if they are not competent in those areas, that
1
would
week term
try
limits.
and be a show an expansion of governmental power. And yeah, sure, I think we could both agree on that. But the problem is that if you do have term limits, you then surrender that power to more and more lobbying groups or private businesses that are allowed to regulate themselves because only they understand the ins and outs of their business, and that becomes vastly problematic from a
I
No,
competition
like
elected
standpoint.
members of,
I
I'm
don't
sorry,
believe in
Conchetta, one
that.
second. So,
Okay.
so elected officials are not regulators. We have professional regulators that are employed by federal agencies. Okay.
Correct.
So now I
Point of
think the
order,
real
gentlemen.
problem.
What are we arguing about?
Well, right now we're talking about term limits.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Again, I'm going to go back to my earlier point, which
Feels a
is I
little
think the
circular.
reason why we have such intensive lobbying of the federal government is because it is so outgrown. I'm sorry, not outgrown. It has broadened its scope and exercise of authority so greatly that citizens and well, citizens are compelled to
Mhm.
lobby their government for protection, right? Whether that is exemptions from taxes, whether it's to
But
incur
taxes are at an
disadvantage to
all-time
their
low.
competitors, right? So, and then also the regulatory state. Okay, so this isn't an argument for no government, no regulation, no taxes, but I think we all can agree that the size and scope of government has continued to grow and grow and grow, and this
No,
incentivizes behavior by
To
citizens.
meet the needs of the citizens. Correct.
No, so for example, the Federal Department of Education is not
No,
meeting
do
the
the
needs of
EPA.
citizens.
Do the
Okay?
EPA.
no, I actually push back on that it's like substantially growing that much. It's like not more so than, you know, the
When you have
population
the
needs
federal
it to.
government regulating washing machines and toilet discharge, those are easy examples to poke fun at this, that the federal government is a leviathan that continues to
No,
grow.
you should in fact regulate industries so that you get safe products for your citizens.
No one's
I'm gonna
arguing
go out on a
against
limb
that.
and say that.
However,
I mean, you
when you try
just
to
did though, my dear. I'm sorry to say.
No, I explicitly said this isn't an argument for no regulation, and here you are now trying to say, well, we ought to regulate for safety. Well, of course,
Yes,
but when the
including washing
expansive
machines.
nature of the federal government and results in the president trying to abuse OSHA, right, to mandate COVID jabs, okay, that is again
No,
a
that's in the
function of an
national interest and is
ever-expanding
completely
government.
reasonable. In fact, I think he's been far,
But
far too
this
nice
isn't an
about it.
argument about reasonableness or not. It's about abusing government power and continuing to
I would say
expand
it
the scope
furthers the
of that government
national
authority.
interest, and so I'm okay with this. If it is overreach, then it should have been a power that should be there in the first place.
If what I generally see, like when you have like the first room where the legislation comes in, is like the junior room. So that's like the House of Representatives in your kind of case, right? So it's like people will talk about that, and it's more like extremely political. And then in the second room, which is the Senate, there is like more lobbying and more like deep talk about like certain topics going on. And when you have that in the second room, you want to have like people that are like already like invested in those like topics, so they need to have like a certain baggage. If they don't have that certain baggage, they cannot they cannot they cannot talk about that. So if you want to have like a senior room within your own system, which you guys have, right? Which is the Senate. Uh, if you guys don't want to have that overall, you can make that distinction. But then the lobbyists will come to the people that will be in power for just 1 year or 2 year or whatever, they will come to those people, right? They will try to leverage those people, and I think like for the Netherlands, it's more like the lobbyists are more in the senior like thing. Maybe they are on the both sides within the American system, which is bad. But overall, I think like
You gotta help
those.
me out here. I feel like we're deviating from the topic. Is this about term limits, or are we back on the Senate?
I genuinely think that when we talk about the Senate and the term limits, right, those people can have more experience.
Sure.
So those term limits can be more expanded. I'm not going to say that it's going to be like 40 years or something like that, but I'm just going to say that it makes more sense that those
the
people
term
can-
limits should be higher for Senate Senate.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that
Nah,
would make
1
more
week
sense.
term limits.
Yeah, just swap them
This
out.
is not a
Just
joke.
get an American every week. But
This is not a joke.
that would be a joke
No,
overall
this is not a
because
joke.
Hold on.
because
Let Control finish, please.
that's just abolishing the Senate. So if you want to abolish the Senate, fair enough. But okay, but I just think overall, I think it's good to have like a senior, like more of like a heavyweight like thing exposed to like the House of Representative, because that's how it goes in most like parliamentary or like even in Anglo-Saxon like systems. So yeah, which is going to thing right now. So yeah, whatever. You're already doing it, but right now it's just crazy bonkers because you guys let like dementia people like sitting in the Senate or whatever, you know.
Yeah, no,
You guys don't care.
Feinstein's just
So yeah.
vanished. She's just fucking gone, mate.
Right, and this is an
Her and Queen
argument again
England, same
for
boat.
term limits. You know, I don't know that
Yeah,
these
1 week.
appeals to having special interests having too much power. You guys on the left right now want us to believe that they are all powerful right now. And given that our current structure is without term limits at the federal government level, then what could be worse? Further, the otherwise normal argument against term limits is that without 30-year old career senators in there, you would have a professional class of legislative staffers. But that's what we have functionally right now when you have a senator who's been sitting there for 30 years, who has very little turnover in their upper staffing positions. We still have a professional legislative staffing class there. So again, we're not any better off, right, without term limits. So I'm not quite sure, this argument against term limits that, we'll throw our hands up and say special interests will be more powerful. Can they be any more powerful than you guys are telling us they are now? Because it doesn't seem to be the case.
Yes, they would.
How so, specifically?
I want a week term limit.
Specifically, they are
Absolutely.
more powerful because they are more influential on the actual senators or on the actual Congress members.
You guys argue right now that there is direct bribery and corruption going on in Congress right now. How does that change?
I can't say that I argue that point.
Oh,
It intensifies the ability to either bribe or manipulate. And I don't even think those would be the correct terms. I would say it's more like an obfuscation of, oh, you'll be hailed as a hero, you'll be representing your constituents, like most lobbying how it actually happens, outside of political donations on top of it. It specifically magnifies it because you don't have those, as much as it may seem like a negative to have, you don't have those safe senators that are there arguing for their constituents. An example that I will encourage all of you to go and look up is a man by the name of Ernie Chambers, Ernie Chambers was a senator from Nebraska. He was one of the only black senators from Nebraska. He was specifically targeted by a statute of limitation or a term limits bill because he was not liked because he kept hounding people for representing his constituents that were one of the only few black constituents in Nebraska. It becomes a huge problem.
Well, I think you're arguing at the margins that it would intensify. I think more importantly is that forcing rotation in office through term limits would contribute, right, to mitigating the
moreover, you
building
get
of
people like
permanent
Strom.
relationships among members and lobbyists.
Hold on, you got interrupted. I didn't.
Yeah, I did. So
contribute to
term limits would force this rotation, competitive rotation of politicians, which I think would hinder or mitigate the formation of permanent relationships between long-serving members of Congress and special interests, lobbyists, and others who attempt to buy their way into influence.
yes.
Right?
It also eliminates the long-term relationship between the members of Congress and their constituents.
Well, remember the old running joke back in the 80s was that we had senators that would get reelected, would end up serving longer than members of the Soviet Politburo. I mean, they were there forever, and I think we all generally agree that we have
we had
a large,
politicians who do that, yeah.
we have a large number
in the
of elected
1980s?
officials who were there forever.
When was that? In the 1980s? Because the Soviet Union fell in the 1990s. So
80s, yeah.
1991.
I thought I said 80s.
So yeah, that's just 10 years.
May I direct
so.
your attention to Strom Thurmond, a man who served for 48 years in the Senate, and is famously, amazingly, the most racist Southerner. Like just about the most racist Southerner.
I know you
can
could only exceed him by mentioning Robert Byrd.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so so I think there is an argument to be made that term limits can mitigate the influence of lobbyists and special interests because you don't form these decades-long relationships.
As well as exacerbate them.
Debate is what would you think a good term limit would be?
1 week.
Yeah.
You know, I think
20 years.
I think for the
like
House
career.
No, not at all. That's what I'm arguing against. I think.
I mean,
a
20 years is still a term limit.
Don't ask him a question.
Yeah, he's on the other end.
Out. Yeah, so hold on.
No, I think what I would be suggesting is something like 4 terms for a House representative and maybe 2. So 12 years at most for a senator, right? 8 for a House of Representative or representative of the House.
I don't know. I think
before
that
they're termed out and can no longer serve, not how much
feel like
their
you
each
want
individual term is.
people that can actually be like dedicated to politics. Like you don't want corruption, and I know that's what breeds it, but don't you want like someone who's maybe like, I mean, if there was a senator and you really liked them and you were like, hey, this person is like a good leader, or they're good at what they do, or I trust them, or they have my interest, all the reasons. And it's like, oh, well, like you got to just find a new one every year. Maybe you're ready to do that. Do you think most people are ready to do that?
Yeah.
Well, every year is not the idea though, right? So,
I mean, every
week.
we already do it every 2 years in the House, right? They're up for re-election, right? And we do it every 6 years for senators. And so limiting them to say 4 times in the House,
we don't
2
find
times in the
new
Senate.
qualified candidates. We vote for whichever candidates we feel are qualified, and we go with our past experience.
Okay.
Yeah, every week.
Here's the thing.
That's ridiculous.
Here's the thing, though. We have
it's not.
We have the consistent, constant complaint that Congress is broken. I think a symptom of that is that we have long-serving senators and members of the House who just aren't doing anything productive. And I think term limits would help that by introducing competitive rotation through these seats.
I mean, but there is competitive rotation. There's just competitive rotation like within the voters' interest and like vested voting. I mean,
all right,
it's not like
Dr. K,
but
yeah,
I will bite.
Yeah,
I will bite.
Yeah.
Tell me why a week.
Not specifically a week, but term limits should essentially be ad hoc, right? Is you vote in your elected member for that session, and then at the end of that session, they no longer hold that position.
Yeah, that's the thing about like having sessions, and that's why people choose to have to like different sessions. So when you
how
have
long
like
is
the
it?
House of Representatives, right? You have like a different session than the Senate, because that's like just different. So and that comes boils down to years overall, because of the
I mean,
fact that
moreover,
you don't want to go to the election box every fucking week. This is a fucking statement that you make,
well,
and this is
well,
fucking
the
spitting.
idea
We
with
know
this, right?
what you
Well,
make.
let him
It's fucking
okay,
silly.
he said
Mm,
let's just agree that it would be a session, so which is a little bit less than a year. But
yes.
it would probably make them a little bit more gun ho or connected to the ideas of what they were elected to do. So per
Mm,
session,
yep.
help me flesh it out for me.
Yeah,
It,
because what you're trying to do, right, is you ultimately want to create as democratic a system as possible, right? And there are examples of this literally like incredibly short term limit behavior already in existence. Three quick examples, and obviously they aren't perfect, but they're examples of it. Is you have San Marino, you have Switzerland, and you have Chiapas with the Zaptistas, who already practice basically exactly what this is, where
Examples don't go ahead.
yeah,
Keep
where
going.
per session you'll have like a very short-termed person, and generally government is instead done by direct democracy on various sort of legislation that's put forward. So you vote on your legislation rather than on your politicians, right? You don't let
so yeah, so within
you rule
Switzerland,
by referendum essentially.
so when it comes to Switzerland, it's more like a rotating,
Yes.
like prime minister, that kind of stuff.
Mm,
So I can see that appeal. So you have
yes.
like a rotating prime minister, and so yeah. But
Yeah,
that being said,
the
like
Swiss have
it's
no official head of state. Like it's
yeah.
technically a permanently rotating musical chair.
Debate,
But
is
yeah,
that something you would buy on?
overall, I just want to say, like, you want to have like something when you have like your state representative, and you wanna talk about your state representative and your local representative. You want to know who that is and
Mm,
who you can talk to that. And overall, building up that expertise takes years. It actually takes years. Like, I've been in local politics,
mm,
so I know that I know that I've been in like for 12 years I've been in local politics, and I moved in between times from one county to another county, and now that I'm in the newer county, I don't know shit about what's going on here. So I need to
mm-hmm.
educate me on all these things again. So
Yep.
for me to say, like, yeah, I'm the political guy, you can choose me, whatever, I could run, and I could be elected, but I don't want to do that because of the fact that I would I, s- I would talk shit out of my mouth. So
Mm,
I'm not gonna do that. So I'm just saying, like overall, it's like these senators that are like 1 or 2 years within their senatorship, right? They don't know shit what they're talking about. If they are like more longer in their period, they generally know more about the craft and the craftsmanship, about what it means to be a senator. They can curve the lobbyists because they know what the lobbyists are asking from them. So it's important to know, if you get a lobbyist to you, right? You want to know what they are going to ask from you. And if you are just 1 year politician, you don't know what they're asking from you because you don't know what kind of like
Yeah.
thing you're talking about.
I mean,
So
you can
mean-
serve in multiple roles, right? You can be reelected, right? Like I'm not saying, every fucking session it has to be a new
I just
person, right? If you did a good job, people can reelect you and be like, yeah,
okay,
Tony
then they
understands
can
our
well,
still
then
community.
I
then
want to see if
you're
debate.
against limit
Hold on.
terms.
Hold on.
Overall,
I want to see if debate would bite on this. What do you kind of think about that? So,
I'm not sure what that is. I heard some references to really tiny countries that we shouldn't give a shit about anyway.
Jesus, come on.
At
There's
least in
people
this
that live
discussion.
there. probably
come on, no,
Which
like, can you give
countries
like
are
a
you
real
talking
answer?
about?
Because I
the
thought he made a
act
really good point.
the
Go ahead.
actual the statement would be, or the question is, uh, let's
Ad
just
hoc
do House
democracy.
members. Let's just do House members are only elected one session, and then they have to rerun again.
So
What's the one
is it
session?
session in the U.S. House 2 years, or is it a single year?
No, it's that single year actual from. Oh fuck! I was hoping you'd
They
kind of
use a
remember
fiscal
it.
year, like October to September, or
Yeah, it's super short. It's like practically all the summer months, basically. Um,
no?
so
So I think that's going too far and introduces prohibitive costs into
okay,
administering elections. I guess maybe you could split up one third, one third, one third to make it less costly, but you're still incurring the cost of getting 100 million people together to vote every couple of years to recycle the House. I don't see that as very practical,
Yeah.
and I think it probably introduces. I think at that point, Dustin, I think we're getting to your point where it's not at the margins anymore, but when you get legislators who are just completely unfamiliar with the
mhm,
environment they're in now, trying to practically legislate, I don't think that's a practical outcome.
sure.
Having people in there for even 2 years is probably not enough, which is why I'm kind of thinking 6 to 8 years for House members of the House and 2 terms in the Senate,
Mhm.
because you do need to build up some of that institutional memory, that
Do you not
institutional competency.
do you not think 20 years is fair? 20 years is like a career. Like people
I
can
don't
do
want career
something well for
politicians.
20 years and move on. Yeah,
I,
but you don't want newbie politicians either.
well,
You
we
want
have
you
newbie
want
Why
like
politicians all
not?
the time.
you do want those too, but you want veterans and people who have experience and knowledge as well. Like, can
Hmm.
you think of
They can be the same thing.
you want rotating representation, or at least you don't necessarily want rotating representation. You want accurate representation, right?
No,
And
I don't.
so,
I'm not sure
like,
that I buy that, because right now we have a professional class of elected representatives who I
mhm.
think we collectively would complain are not generally representative of our interests. We don't feel they are responsive to us, and
some,
yet and
some.
yet we want to some and we yet we
All,
want to
for
appeal
me
that
at
they
least.
are professional legislators. No, so legislators are rarely actually writing legislation. They provide a vision and a direction, and then they have a team of staffers go with
Mm.
um, not just staffers in his own office, but in other elected members' offices. But more importantly, they bring in members from the federal bureaucracy as well as special interest people to exert their influence. So again, I'm not really buying into the effectiveness of a professional legislator here, because these
Hmm.
simply, I don't think,
I
are
mean,
doing the bulk of the work.
Right now, it feels like an aristocracy going through the motions of democracy more than it does a democratic body. Because I mean, the people that are in our halls of power are extremely unrepresentative of the American people as a whole, whether that be coming from on average an incredibly different socioeconomic class than the majority of Americans, a wildly different upbringing and lifestyle and connections from your average American, and this is caustic to democracy. This is not this is antithetical to it, right?
Sure, and I
Um,
think having long-term serving elected representatives exacerbates that exact problem.
mhm.
I guess sure.
Institutions have interests as well, and legislators, just like federal regulators, become captured by the institutions they're employed by or that they are
Mhm.
regulating, for example. And so no longer are they responsive to our interests, but they
Is
are actually responsive to the interests of themselves and their office.
is it
I
fair to ask that you can see the benefits though
Benefits of.
of an experienced politician?
Well, in terms of the game of politics, yes. In terms of effective legislation, no, because simply these folks do not possess the professional competency, right, to exert themselves in the writing and or in the formulation of legislation, right?
So I guess
I
my
I
mean,
my question just becomes
they
like,
don't.
what do you think
No, they
if you
don't. I
think
mean, you.
if you think that
Go
they
ahead.
already have if they're already using our professional if you already believe that this lack of a professional class or this um, actual professional class is causing a lot of problems, because of intertwining with regulators, and you remove the actual professional class and you just leave the knowledgeable as far as like the regulators and the regulated, which you yourself already admitted are quite intertwined or leave and join each other at the same time. Don't you see a conflict with that?
Oh, I think
No,
we
I
have
think you're
plenty of
conflating a
competence.
couple of points here. I think my point is that we have a class of career politicians that are
Sure.
simply ineffective. They are a symptom of a larger problem, which is a broken Congress. Okay, I suggest term limits as a way to competitively remove these people and bring in new people. Now, the
Break up the
the
monopolization.
of at least the politicians, we're always going to have a professional class of legislative staffers. These are the subject matter experts, whether it's environmental policy, healthcare policy, national defense, intelligence, yada, yada, yada. We're always going to have those people there. They're there now. They will be there after term limits. Okay.
Debate
Hold
board. I
on.
just want to.
Just let him.
I just want to say. I would say this because of the fact that Bernie Sanders has been in politics forever, right?
Maybe you have a
And
point.
Like,
he's
Nick.
one, and
and
he's
and
one of the
and
most least effective as far as
he's
passing
least
legislation
effective,
as
but
passing
he's like
legislation
when
as a
it
politician.
comes to
I
political
like him.
movements, right? He
I don't think
moves to the left. He shifts at the Overton window. I'm not a Bernie
But that's
bro
not.
whatsoever, but
No, you're
I'm
not
just
making the point that he's
I'm just
talking
saying.
about. It is
I'm
not about
just
the
no
Overton.
no.
Yeah, you're not saying
I'm
something
just
that's
saying.
relevant towards the
I'm saying.
conversation, so it doesn't make
I'm
sense to
saying
allow
that
you to
when
keep
it comes to
going on.
I'm saying that when it comes to politics, right? It's interesting to have these people in your
I don't give a
political
rat's
system.
sass about
Oh,
interesting. You know who was
you
interesting?
don't care.
Donald
You
Trump
don't care.
was
Donald
amazingly
Kerr was
interesting.
also interesting. Yeah, he
What
was
we're
also
talking
interesting.
about, what the question is before you is legislation, right?
Oh,
What
you
he's
just want to have like
addressing.
you just want to have politicians that are effective in their legislation. You don't want to
It
have
takes
like
more than
politicians
that.
that are talking to the people. You just want to have people that are not interested to the
Abolish
people.
politicians.
This is silly. This is silly because you need to have like people that are talking to the people. This is
Yes.
like politics.
Yes, you know what
You're
that's
talking
called?
besides politics.
You got your show horses, and then you got your work horses, right?
You think that works that way? That doesn't
Yes.
work that way. No, it doesn't.
Okay, so help me figure out if Bernie Sanders was so great, why was he so lacking in fucking legislation passes as a politician?
Because he's ideologically isolated.
Yes.
Yes.
And
yes,
it's a
and
fucking
also
problem.
it's
Yeah, exactly.
not
We
that-
need more far left politicians. I agree.
It's when we're talking about like when we're talking about like politicians, the politicians are not workhorses or just political horses. It's not
Cohort.
you're not either a populist or you're just like somebody that likes to talk about policies. You're
Right
both.
now they're the
You
aristocracy in the United States.
you gotta work out your funding as like a politician. You gotta do that stuff, right? Within the US. That kind of stuff, you gotta sort it out. You cannot say you're just a policy guy. You cannot rely on that. That doesn't work.
What are you talking about?
Yeah,
They want
I'm
working
totally
You're
class
lost
talking
on
about
politicians.
you're talking about the actual ins and outs of getting elected. But the conversation that we're having is about the structural system within the Senate itself. It's an incredibly boring fucking conversation. Don't get me wrong. I'm not disagreeing with you on that one. What we're talking about and what Debate Board was bringing up is your professional class of legislators, i.e., the people that work under these politicians. He says that those people are always going to be there and they're intertwined with the regulators. So you at least want to rotate his statement. Please fucking correct me if I'm wrong. His statement is that you want to rotate out at least the politicians because they are more apt to work towards the will of the people. Bernie Sanders bringing him up doesn't connect at all.
No, but I think when you talk about like politicians that are like extremely popular amongst like the people, I think when you talk about like Bernie Sanders within the state of Vermont, he was extremely popular. Like we can maybe talk about like other states where other like politicians were also like extremely popular for a longer time of the period, whatever.
Sure.
So I think those I honestly like I think those people have like certain experience and certain like popularity that deserves some attention with in like your legislative body,
Yeah,
I
they're
think
great
that's
show horses. I really want those speeches. Those speeches are very important. I think
oh,
Bernie
but
Sanders does
no,
fill a
but
very
it doesn't.
important role. And
It doesn't necessarily mean that they are just elected for their speeches. It means that they are elected for their interest, right? So you can say they are just show horses. They are just
correct.
populists, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not a Bernie bro myself. I'm a
Well,
liberal, but
yeah, I
so
don't think it's
I'm not a socialist whatsoever. But I'm just advocating for the fact that people can elect like people that are advocating for their interests, right?
True.
yes.
For a longer time of period. That's my whole idea.
I think what we see, though, is that
Correct.
as politicians serve longer and longer and longer, they become more resistant to constituent influence, right? Because in America, nationally elected officials, they have upwards of an 80 to 85% reelection rate, right? So as they serve longer and longer, they become they become insulated from their constituents.
Sure.
They become far more dependent on moneyed interests to ensure their reelection. And they become captured by their own by their own institutions, right, to preserve the interests of their institution in office, rather than respond to the interests of their constituents.
Yeah, they become aristocracy.
Whatever we want to call it, I don't care. But that's the practical effect, and I think, Chinchilla, you're not seeing that, because maybe that's different where you're
where
at.
is the tipping point? Where's the tipping point? Like when becomes like
Exactly
like
where
somebody
he wants to set the term limits.
like
No,
is
You're
it
this
is
is
trying
like
to
my
get
my
away
whole
from
point.
is it
He's
too
asking, where do you want to set it?
because
There's no.
I genuinely
He
think like when
disagrees
you
with
talk
term limits.
I genuinely think like when you talk about
Abolish
like somebody
politicians.
that should be like in power, right, with being effective, right, this person should be 10 years in power at least, because of the fact that you have like a legislative body like that what you call it, that the bureau that you gotta work against, because of the fact like the fourth power, like the fourth power is like the, shit. I'm talking too much Dutch, so. But yeah. Anyways, anyways,
That's okay.
it's like you have like people that are within the body of the government itself underneath you as the legislative body, of which you gotta cooperate with, and that's what I'm talking about. If you understand me, and that's what we
Yeah.
call the fourth power. So, so if you if you want to make things work, you gotta you really wanna stay longer term, or you want to stay longer in power, to make to first of all, like 2 years, we already assessed that is like too short, right, to even grasp like politics. So if you want to have like some impact on politics, you might want to be 4 years in politics. So it might be somewhere okay to be in politics for 12 years. And if you're going to call that a career politician, you can call it a career politician, but those people are going to make like pretty good like effects on society overall. What they want to do, at least.
Why not just have monarchies at that point? I mean,
12 years? Is
I
that
think, Chinchilla, it's interesting you
Just
mentioned
laugh,
12
This was
years.
a guy that
because-
said like
yeah,
he
12.
wanted him for a week, so 12 years would be pretty close. In
okay?
comparison to
That
time.
would be a monarchy. Yeah, you're right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I want ad hoc. I'm sorry,
Chinchilla,
I'm a
I think
fan
you and
of
I
it.
arrived at 12 years, which is actually two terms for a senator here in the U.S., at least in that chamber. So, it's not like I'm anyway advocating for 1 to 2 year, term limits, but successive cycles, right, or terms. to get us upwards of 8 to 12 years. There's no magic number here, but again, it seems like term limits seems to be a practical response to many of the complaints people have against the current performance of Congress, and I'm not hearing any practical arguments against it, other than, hey, we're just going to weigh this thing differently or more so. Dustin, you're kind of making a face, and I think what
I
I'm
am
doing is appealing to your
quite.
comment that, well, hey, if we remove the professional career politicians, then we're going to have an over reliance on special interests.
Populists.
Right?
You're gonna have a over reliance on populists. You're just gonna have populists in that case. But yeah,
Awesome.
whatever.
Well, maybe not. That's I mean that's complete speculation. But
I
Dustin
think that's
has a
no. I
point
think that would.
here. I just think it
I
operates at the
very.
margins more so than what he's expressing here.
I think that's very much what would happen. Wouldn't you? You just get. Yeah, you're relying. You're appealing to populists. You'd need a new populist. You'd turn into like pop politics.
Awesome.
We have populists now. I don't
Yeah, we
see.
do have populists now, but it would be inherent. Like you would require them.
Fuck
Why?
yeah.
Why would that be a requirement?
Because
I mean,
you would have to you'd have to continuously try to get the most appealing person elected, and it would be the most appealing person for the moment, but not like over time. Like you want, I mean, a boring senator is not necessarily a bad thing. An exciting senator is good, but a boring one isn't bad either. It means things are going right. Like when things are going right, sometimes there's not a lot of noise. Like it's not a big deal.
oh, sure. I'm just not following how having
How
a more
having those
rapid
that set of
rotation of people through office would necessarily result in either more appeals to populism or more populists running.
because there would be a less
Populists
of
are
an
good.
investment.
And
Well,
it sounds what you're
they,
doing is kind of appealing to the most base wants and desires of the electorate,
That's
correct.
what
right? As
it
being
would
poor
do.
voters, poor judges of political quality.
Well, it
Well,
sounds like we need a more
I
politically educated, like, constituency,
I
then.
don't think I would necessarily say more appealing to like people of lower quality.
But
I would
popularity,
say,
good.
I would say that continual election and rise of populist will end up being a terrible, terrible thing, as I
Nah.
think we could all kind of agree with as far as like historical representations of what populism has been
Well,
and
but we
how
see
it's kind of
functionally
shook
right
out.
now, in any practical sense now, all of these people running for Congress and running for president are in the form of a populist. I mean, they're all out there over promising on products they simply cannot and will not deliver on for the most part.
I
That's
would have
another
to
major
They can
complaint of the
disagree.
deliver
last
empty
20
promises,
years.
though. That's pretty good.
I would have to disagree as far as like
Mhm.
Joe Biden is definitely not a populist.
Well, no, but I think what's happening here is populist is being a proxy for a candidate who just promises, right? Who over promises to electors in the or voters in the
So,
district, as
debate,
opposed to a
bro.
true populist.
Right,
Would you say that?
but
Would you?
what they would deliver on and what they would be forced to deliver on are those immediate sort of needs, those populist needs, right? As opposed to maybe something more long term, more long uh, facing forward, infrastructure, other things like that. I think that you run into a lot of problems if you end up kind of playing to the crowd all the time.
Interesting though, but here's where we are now, right? I mean, we have you guys on your side are articulating an argument that America's infrastructure is decimated, right? And yet this has occurred not only in one era, but successive eras of a career politician class.
Yeah, sure, but so is every other successful. I don't think you'd want to use that example because so is every other successful era of the United States, right? Like, I think just because it's the status quo now and you can promise all these changes and it's suddenly going to be the opposite is not necessarily true,
Well, how far
right?
back
So,
in history are we going to reach, though, right? Because I constantly hear we can't reach back to the founding fathers because America has changed. We've evolved. Different things have occurred, and now we need a more responsive political class. So to say that, sure,
Or
we
maybe
had
they're
this
wrong.
1950s boom after World War II
yeah,
happen
sure.
in an era of career politicians, well, we can't really attribute that to career politicians.
Right. No, my
Okay.
my statement is you don't get to use that against me as a message for a more populist or
No, I see your
a
point.
pro
No, I see
for
your point.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I
Because I
get
can't
it.
fucking throw it off my tongue right now, so I appreciate it.
No, I mean, it is a bit unfair of me to reach back and only identify the failures, right, and not account for the successes.
Yeah, I
Right.
look, um, I may have to kind of bow out on this one because it does seem like the panel. I mean, you even got, I don't think he realizes yet, but I think you even got Chinchilla to kind of agree with you. Um, I may have to bow
I
out.
mean,
I've just got a really bad kind of taste in my mouth as far as the state of Nebraska and the targeting of
Because
various
you agreed
chambers.
with me.
No, I don't think that I do agree with you, but I don't think that either one of us are on, at least I hope for the entire night, we're not on two, what's the word that I want to kind of like look here
different
for?
footing or something, and
No, I don't think we're on two ideological bounds as far as like it's got to be. I feel like it's very logical as far as maybe I'm trying to stroke myself off here, but I feel like our disagreements are more less ideologically driven than they are bad faith. Does that make sense?
Yep.
For me personally, I'm totally like just bad faith. I just wanted to have like Prime elected at 4 years of age as president of the United States till he becomes like 100 years of age. That's just me. I'm just totally bad faith in that. But
Okay.
I'm just saying that. So
Anyway, I think
Prime.
actually, I think this is the a good place to end it actually, because I think we've come to a consensus or something. I don't know. Anyway, or something.
Prime is just done.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
yeah, I
So
think we're just done.
thank you all for being here. Much appreciated to the participants and to the audience members. We'll be back tomorrow with something or something. I don't know. We'll work it out. I'll hit the
He's
follow
got
button
no
if you
life,
haven't
so
done
he'll
so
be here.
yet. If you've been enjoying this content, exclamation point social and chat for our social media. We got your Twitter where we tweet. You got your Discord where we discuss things, and YouTube where that sneeze is coming out for a little bit. Where you'll find the VOD, so like, comment, subscribe. If you miss anything, consider becoming a YouTube member and hitting that join button.